Welcome to Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek. I am your co-host, Zach Badger Davis, and sitting across from me today is...
Hi, I'm Elise.
And sitting to her left? I can't do backwards.
Her left, your right,
yeah.
My middle. Hi, I'm Juliana Chauncey, a.k.a. Chauncey.
Chauncey is sitting in her own middle.
Always am.
Question of the day. This will be very relevant. What was the first social media app you first engaged with regularly?
AIM.
That's a good one. I guess that would technically be my answer. That's not what I'm going to say, but I like that.
Tangent. My housemate...
Would you consider that a social media app, though? Isn't that a chat client?
It's DMing. Before there was a...
And you could make a profile and stuff.
Yeah, oh my God, your profile of AIM would be like, the girls would do it, so if you highlighted it and the lines weren't all exactly at the same edge, like, you were sloppy. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to, like, use, like, subscript and, like, periods and, like, things so that if you highlighted it, it was, like, a perfect block of text.
But could you interact with strangers?
You could message anyone. I mean, you could message Smarter Child. He always answered.
Is then texting considered a social media app?
Well, I had AIM before I had texting.
But I'm like, would you consider texting to be a social media app?
I think yes, because WhatsApp is an app. And it's
is
social.
It social media?
Yeah, but there's so much that you could do with. Come on, Elise.
We're getting this is
like
a semantic thing.
This
right
is
now.
One of the first social medias, so it's like there was nothing else.
I don't know if I consider it social. I think social media, you have to be able to engage with a larger community of people.
It was the most social you could be on media.
There were chat rooms.
Yeah, there were chat rooms.
Chat rooms is a different conversation.
So you could get all your friends into a chat room that you made. You can get one that wasn't private if you wanted.
Don't back down, Chauncey.
Yeah, I think you could talk to strangers. I feel like I never did. So maybe I'm making that up.
No, because, like, where else did that, like, ASL thing come from?
I feel like that was Omegle.
Omegle was after, though.
Yeah, that was later.
That was a time.
I'm not even familiar with what
you don't want to know.
You don't want to be. AIM was great. You'd make your away messages like song lyrics or like going away for a bit, watching TV, be back soon, and you'd like set all these different colors and fonts and everything and have them saved in this like basically folder on AIM of things that you could save. And you'd see like this little door pop open and shut when someone would log on and off, and there'd be this little like door sound.
I remember that. Yeah, you get like excited because
like
your
crush
exactly.
And then you put like an away message on and off, or you'd like sign on and off and on and off, so they'd be like, "What's that sound?" Oh, it's that beautiful girl I know.
You were flirting with girls? That's cool.
No, I'm being my crush.
Oh, I got
looking
it.
At me hitting the open and close button.
What about you, Elise?
Yeah.
I was going to say AIM, but since Chauncey did, I'm going to switch it up and say MySpace was definitely my first one that I engage with super regularly and definitely qualifies as social media.
For sure. Code.
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah.
I tried to make my own. You know how you could go to people's sites, like layout sites? Yeah. I tried to make my own once, and I think I did a decent job. I wish I could find it.
I remember going into my first coding class in college, and like they were doing HTML and CSS, and I was just sitting there like, wait, so we're learning MySpace?
Wasn't MySpace acquired for like a ridiculous amount of money after Facebook and everything had come out?
Well, in the beginning, Facebook, you could only join if you had a college email address.
So this is going to be relevant to me because that was the first, like I had MySpace, but I never got hooked into it. I didn't have like a community. I was Tom's friend, not the Tom that people might be thinking of, but Facebook. So yeah, there's I think, is it Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, where he talks about a lot of luck in life is just based on timing. And Facebook came out my freshman year of college, and as Elise pointed out, it was only 4 colleges, and Wisconsin was one of the first probably 20 schools to get it. So like I was the first wave of people to ever have Facebook, and it was crack instantly. Like it actually was so much fun back in the day when it was that small network of people, and like you don't know anyone, so it's a fun way to get to know people, and like you would post your embarrassing photos and you would organize parties, and like it actually had a really cool application. I loved Facebook at that time, and it was so addictive right off the bat. Like you'd go in the library and like 3 out of 4 computers was just Facebook. So I had 4 years of Facebook overdosing in college. fast forward, get out of college, and what's my first job out of school? I'm doing social media marketing for small businesses. Like, I'm showing them how to do Facebook and like building strategy, and like I can do the event pages and all the other shit. So like I got a job right out of school basically just because of luck, because no one had more Facebook exposure than me, maybe like save the few people that were at Harvard using it. But yeah, Facebook.
We had very different first Facebook experiences because I remember where I was when this happened. I was in my friend's basement. Well, actually, she lived in a basement apartment. And my other friend was sitting at the computer. She was like one of the nerdier of the friends, and she was all excited because they opened it up to non-college people. And she had made her Facebook, and she wanted us all to, like, MySpace is boring, get on Facebook. And I remember us all being like, no, we're not going on Facebook. Losers use Facebook. Like, weird old people use Facebook. And, like, it took a while for us to finally sign up because we were like, we don't want to use this stupid app. What is this?
It was interesting when they opened it up to everybody because it wasn't just young people that joined. It was like your mom and your grandmother was on there.
And now they run it.
They are the biggest audience for sure. Yeah. Like, if you go on Facebook, I feel like the majority of the activity in like any group that I'm in is not my age range, not that I'm young.
I was in the same boat with Facebook. My friend who introduced me to MySpace was like, oh, you got to check out this new one. And I distinctly remember being on the playground in grade school and telling people to get Facebook because I wanted them on it too. And yeah, but I hated that you couldn't put a song.
Yeah, that part was hard to like get used to because and then you couldn't have like the little like glowing like
you couldn't customize anything.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it succeeded. Like, that's why I had trouble with MySpace, is it just, there was no uniformity to it. Apparently they decided that was the approach, and it seems to have paid off. Okay. That's a good, reminder. We're going to Wisconsin. Woo!
Ooh.
Woo!
Yay!
Woo! You guys, we're less than a month away.
It's crazy.
It's insane. Leah came here and her first question's like, are you super excited? And I'm to the point in life where like I don't get excited for a thing until it's the day before, like I'm packing for it. But like I'm excited. I'm very excited, especially because Big Ten football started, so it's kind of gotten the juices flowing a little bit. But yeah, so we're coming to Wisconsin. We got 2 very public events for you guys. We're going to be in Delafield on Wednesday, October 13th. We're going to be in Fitchburg, which is just south of Madison, on October 15th. The first event is just a regular old meet and greet, drink some beers, hang out, talk hiking. The event on the 15th is going to be a live podcast. We're going to have a super secret guest, and we're going to do more meet and greet, more beer drinking. It's going to be a great time. We should have some swag at both of those events. Actually, I'm going to pull the trigger on that tomorrow, I believe. So yeah, we're super stoked. We would like to see all of our Midwest friends. If you're in Wisconsin or anywhere within driving distance, please come on out and say hey and grab a drink. Okay, let's get to today's panel. I'm not totally sure how to introduce it, so maybe we'll just go with the title and we'll let the show unfold. But I think we'll have some lively conversation here. So today's panel is obviously backpacking and social media, the interface of the two. Social media is kind of omnipresent in much of our world, and obviously it's not without negative and positive consequence in the world of backpacking as well. So let's dive right in. I think this will be a little bit different than previous episodes where like we're offering advice and then weighing in on it. Mine isn't necessarily advice driven as much as it is just like bringing up a subject and seeing where the conversation takes us.
Yeah, I think the neat one about this is that when we were talking about it, like, it's hard to make up your side on like one or the other. Like, it's not like vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream, you know, like, do you like sprinkles or do you like marshmallows? Like, it's so hard to pick a side because I like both sides for different reasons, and like I can sit here arguing against myself for probably the entire episode.
For sure. And I'm definitely going to come across as like the grumpy old man in the conversation. Like, I think at least right now I skew a little bit more negative with social media, and this is just a reflection of me as a person. I understand social media as a tool, and like there's no such thing as a good or bad tool. It's how you use it. So I'm just reflecting on my own engagement with social media, but I think a lot of my conversation matter is going to skew more in that direction, whereas you guys would probably have a better relationship with social media. So I think we can offer the full spectrum of takes here. I'm going to start. So I do want to say for this particular point that I do see both sides of the coin here. Elise is going to take the other side of this, so I'm not going to harp on it, but I want to talk about how I think that social media can be a largely ineffective tool for learning about backpacking and specifically through hiking. And Elise is going to bring up a certain social media tool that I think can be very effective. I think one that can be very ineffective is Instagram. And Instagram is ineffective for the reason that people tend to just share the highlights. And I think that there is some people who do a good job of giving you the full picture or maybe even highlighting the negative aspects of it. But I think the way that a lot of people engage with Instagram is they give you the highlight reel. I think that's what elicits the best response from people, and people are trained to chase that carrot. So backpacking is no different. You're going to look at somebody who's through hiking, you're following them, they're going to show you the best views, they're going to show you how tan they're getting, how fit they're getting. Like, you're going to see only the good sides about it. And I think it might draw people into the world with very unrealistic expectations about what they're getting into. There's a reason why the majority of people don't follow through with their like they get on the trail and end up quitting for one reason or the other, whether that's they run out of money, they get injured, life event, something out of their control. A lot of the times it is well within their control, and that's because through hiking is very difficult. And if you're just following somebody on Instagram, you might not see that side of it.
Okay, here I am to argue both sides. That, I think, is like, I also didn't, I'm going to make a lot of disclaimers. I didn't sleep much. I'm in the mood to argue, and I've got a lot of thoughts. So I think, like, I don't know. I don't like that. I just don't like that, because here's why.
It's not an argument, but okay.
I don't like that, because if you are going out to do a thru hike, putting that much money into buying your gear, saving up for the trail, doing all that, and the only prep you did was I looked at some Instagrams, like, you're an idiot. You're not going to do the trail. You're probably going to get off and hurt yourself. And, like, why would you go do 6 months of hiking and spend all this money and invest all this into something that you just looked at some pictures for? Like, that's moronic. However, when I started road tripping, like, and I started going outside and I started actually traveling and seeing the country, I wouldn't have done most of that stuff without Pinterest. And the reason is I had nowhere to start. I had nowhere to look and see what is even out there. There's so many options for a U.S. road trip. Like, where do I go? What's close to what? Where is this on a map? So I went to Pinterest and I typed in cool things in the U.S. and I found a lot of cool things in the U.S. But then I pulled up Google Maps. I found where they all were. I calculated the distances between each. I looked up how much the gas would cost. I went through and I put in the year, the make, the model of my car, and then the average gas prices to budget for the trip. I looked into each place I was going to. Where would we camp? This and that. I could go on, but I needed a starting point. I needed somewhere to say, this is somewhere I can start off from having no idea to having some idea of where to even begin my research. And Instagram is just like Pinterest in that it's just a scrolling thing of pictures that you look at, and you can take something that inspires you and you could say, I want to do research on this and I want to go there and I want to do that. If you're skipping all that middle stuff, that's not social media's fault. That's your fault.
You're arguing a point that I'm not making.
Yes, you are. You're saying that, like, it gets people out who aren't prepared to do it. And this
No. My point is, if you're using Instagram as your primary or lone tool to research something, then you're probably going to get fucked up by that.
Because you're skipping all the middle stuff.
So how much prep did you do for your PCT hike?
Oh my God, I still have the notebooks. I counted calories for every day. I bought foods in bulk. I re-vacuum sealed them into individual bags. Did I eat half of it? No, but I had it in case I needed it. I had 25 boxes lined up in the basement with someone designated to mail them out. I compared about 20 different pieces of gear down to the ounce for how much they'd weigh compared to my total body weight to see if I'd be overloaded. That's how I ended up with the one thinking it was the two, is I was just looking at so many different things. But, like, it's the starting point for where I got the PCT stuff was watching people on YouTube.
Johnson's fiery today. I like it.
I didn't see
okay, so that is your anecdote, and that's good on you. You should do research. My argument is that you shouldn't do research. My argument is that there are plenty of people out there who do very little research. I've talked to.
How's that social media's fault? That's that person's fault.
Well, I think this hits on something that I feel like is an overarching theme in general, is there seems to be a lack of critical thinking on display sometimes on social media. And I think obviously there's a lot of nuance to this conversation, and that's not a blanket statement, but I feel like people do tend to stop applying critical thinking, to your point, Sean, to both of your points, honestly. They just kind of take things at face value and might not dive in for the research, or might not figure out what they actually need to be doing. And I feel like
if you get in a car and you start driving that car and you never took the time to learn how to drive the
car,
right,
that's on them.
It's not the car's fault.
Right. And I think that sometimes, too, social media is kind of almost a microcosm of our society as a whole, and it highlights both ends of the spectrum, like the really great stuff and the really terrible stuff, in the sense that, like, the extremes are on display, especially based on whatever the algorithm is feeding you. And and if you are someone who isn't going to do the research and then blame that on the fact that you saw an Instagram post about a trailhead and you didn't know it was permitted and you showed up and, whatever, you can't, I don't think you can blame anything other than like a lack of critical thinking.
We also can't say that it's somewhere to do your research on. Like
that is the point, but people do it. And if the subject was blogging and backpacking, we could have an entirely different conversation, because I think the depth of content that people go into when they're writing a blog post is very different than when you're going into your Instagram feed. And that is
what Instagram's built for. It's not built to be a blog.
And that's the point. But people engage in the medium in a very similar way that they engaged with blogging 5-10 years ago. And people are replacing it very simply. They're using, the people that they're tracking are Instagram celebrities. And a lot of people use the bulk of their, not a lot of people, a certain percentage of people use the bulk of their education and inspiration through tools like either YouTube, Instagram. I think YouTube can be either positive or negative. It just depends on the person that you're following. But I think Instagram in particular is a very ineffective tool. And I agree with you, that's a bad tool to be using, but people are doing it. And it's uniquely a bad tool.
Any fault of, I just won't be convinced that it's not the fault of the person in that case. If you are going to an app that allows a certain character limit for a caption and a photo, and you're calling that research, you weren't paying attention to what's a credible source and what's not. You should be going online and you should be reading articles about things. You should be looking into what to expect. You should be looking at maps. If you can't do that, you can't blame that on a social media app. I mean, I could see how someone who couldn't figure that out might blame that on a social media app, because that adds up. But that's not the social media app's fault.
Sure, but I'm just saying, as a medium in general, people have replaced blogging, or have replaced researching through blog posts with Instagram. You only have so much time in the day, and if you're going to be inspired by somebody, Instagram is the soup du jour. It's the easiest place to find information. You go to a hashtag and you're just plastered with people who have the most likes. It's very easy to get sucked into that world. And if you were going to be doing that exact same thing 5 or 10 years ago and Googling Appalachian Trail blog 2015, I think the depth and quality of content that you're getting is much more realistic to what the journey is versus what you're getting on Instagram today. That is my point.
Just can't help but disagree.
Okay.
I'm not mad at you. I'm just I'm mad at people that want to blame an app that just lets you post a photo for them not wanting to do research. Like you said, it's a really easy way to do things. It's a really easy way to get answers. And it's if you want to do the easy thing and then go on a super hard hike and a super hard journey, I think we're in agreement here. The point is that Instagram is a bad tool to use for researching a through hike, and we agree on that. But this isn't a panel on Instagram as a research tool, It's
Chance is very fiery today. All right, Chance, go down a couple of notches. Okay. Yikes. Are you sure you don't want to be here, Chance?
Listen, I've gotten so much shit on social media. I've got a lot of thoughts on this stuff.
But yet you're defending it.
Because I don't think that the way that Instagram is used is as a research tool. I think it is a highlight reel. I think it's a photo album that I can look back on fondly. I think if other people want to look at my photos, or I want to look at other people's photos, that's great. Let's share photos. If you decide to come use my Instagram as a primary source of research, are you kidding?
It definitely is used as an educational tool, because if you go to my Explore right now, I would say a third of the posts are what are they, infographics, like giving you an introduction into a subject. Like if you
just posted one on Backpacker Radio.
Exactly.
But that's a page. That's not a person. Like it's
an account.
Business, almost. We're a business. We
I would say that a lot of people on Instagram consider themselves brands, businesses.
I think they're people that have personal business. We'll get into that. But I think like Backpacker Radio is not a person. You're not following Juliana Chauncey. You're not following Zach Davis. You're following Backpacker Radio, or you're following Apple instead of following, like you're following a company.
We could, I think, really delve into the nuance of, what brands should do on social media.
So, what should I do? Should I post, not an educational resource in my about? Is that, the
you
solution?
Could.
Does that solve the question?
I mean, so I hot take, I also think you guys agree.
Yeah. John's is ready to really wound up today.
I emphasize how I haven't slept.
But I totally see where you're coming from, Chance, because I feel like all too often you see people blame something that they heard on Instagram as the reason that their thing went south or whatever. Like they took something at face value, applied it to their life, and oh no, shit's bad now. That even goes for as high level as seeing someone's feed and all the highlights and thinking, oh, my life is so sad, right. Because you're just taking all of that at face value when of course people aren't going to post their shitty days on it. I don't want to talk about my shitty days, maybe to the people who are really close to me. And
it's I'm not obligated to give you them either. I don't know. I had one more thought and then I forgot it real quick. Oh, here's my other thought is that it was piggybacking what you said, but it's for example, let's say you get a water filter. I'm going to go with Sawyer because they've been on the show for a couple. Let's say you go get a Sawyer water filter and you want to know how to use it because I didn't know how to use mine when I first got it. If you choose to follow what Jimmy John 749 says for how you should use your Sawyer filter over, I don't know, reaching out to customer care, sending an email, reading the frequently asked questions on their website, watching their video demo, that's you making a choice to follow Jimmy John 747 and take his advice over a equally accessible source that is much more reputable. And I don't think that's Jimmy whoever's fault. I think that's the person who's making that decision.
We agree that Instagram is a bad tool to learn about stuff. Thank you.
It's never supposed to be.
And on that note,
Christ.
I'm going to sit here for a second with my mouth shut.
Well, it's your turn.
That was my turn.
Do you not have anything you want to add?
I was going to tell my story about how I started road tripping by going on Pinterest, but then I just spiraled there, so I'm just going to sit here quietly for a second.
I want to piggyback off that, Chance, in the fact that, if you're someone who doesn't have family who backpacked or something like that, that might be your only source of even knowing that it's a thing, As someone who grew up in Missouri and camped occasionally, I had a really great friend in high school, and that's how I learned about her family did trips on the JMT, and then that's how I learned about the PCT. But that was way back in high school, and then it wasn't until I found people on Instagram that were hiking, and that is what set me off. To your point, found them, then did the research.
Sounds like you're not just a hat rack.
But yeah, and I think that it can be a great tool for inspiration. You know, honestly, there were some people who I followed who their writing was just beautiful, and that's what kind of lit the fire again. I always knew I wanted to hike the PCT, but then I read their beautiful captions and I was like, wait, this totally resonates with me, and that's something I want to go do. And how do I make that happen? And what's the reality of making that happen? And that's where I really dove in. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, but I think you guys are both studious researchers. I think even the inspiration part of that can be kind of sketchy because You're only getting one side of the coin.
Yeah, it depends who you end up interacting with. Absolutely.
For sure, because you can do research on a thru hike and not necessarily be privy to how difficult it is. If you're just going on a fact basis, this is the gear list that I need, these are the towns that I send resupply things to, without actually being without picking up my book or Chance's book. I think you can do the very basic level research being prepared without actually being cognizant of what you're getting yourself into. And you can blame the person all that you want, but that's the reality is that's what's happening for a lot of people.
Well, that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that if that gives you, let's say Elise did what she did and she went and she did all this research and it's okay, you have a different view maybe the full picture painted for you because of this one eloquent person who you like to read the writing of. Like, it's not like we're watching an Instagram and preparing to go scrub up our arms and go do brain surgery on someone, you know? Like, you're not going to die on the through hike if you don't make it the first 3 days. You'll learn a lesson about preparing.
You might quit your job, sell your house.
If you're willing to take all those risks and that's what you think is a satisfactory amount of prep and not doing shakedown hikes or anything to get you to understand what you're undertaking, cool. However, I think it's not a life or death type thing that a person's going to do. So if they are under that side where they don't see the other side of it where it's like X amount of people quit or whatever, that's not really a huge deal, is it? Like, it's not like I'm going to accidentally kill a person. Am I about to get a million angry DMs?
No. I'm just saying, like, you're minimizing the sacrifice that anybody makes to go into a through hike. So to be like, just because you fail right away, it's not that big of a deal. But I think we're getting a little bit off topic right now. Yeah. I would like to engage you in this argument, but I don't think it's going to serve the conversation. So I'll let Elise did your topic already.
I'll just do a quick snippet, but basically I feel like social media can also, on the other flip side of Zach's argument, be a very powerful tool for learning, depending on, vetting the information that you're getting, obviously. But I know a lot of people, I feel like, that got their start hiking, backpacking, fly fishing, camping, all the things by doing like deep dives on social media. Specifically, I feel that YouTube can be a really great platform because you can go more in depth and you can kind of get more of a feel for the creators that you're listening to and whether or not they have reputable information. And I think that can be a really great way to learn things in digestible ways. If you're someone who likes to watch videos rather than read a long book, that can be a really great resource. But again, it's the same as like anything else on the internet. There is an infinite amount of information coming from an infinite amount of sources, and you want to make sure you vet that. But yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot of great things on Instagram too and YouTube. But I think like the guides, for example, can be really helpful for quick things like a quick overview of Leave No Trace, or like sometimes there's people make really great reels. Obviously, you're not going to be able to go in as in depth on a topic as you might in other mediums, but it can introduce like quick things to you that you might not have learned otherwise.
Yeah, I especially agree with YouTube. YouTube is, I think, to the contrary of Instagram, is a very powerful educator. Like, I've learned a lot myself on YouTube, not necessarily backpacking specific, but like anything breaks at my house, I'm going to YouTube first to learn how to fix it.
For sure.
Okay. Topic 2. Chance is ready to, she's like...
I've actually got like a nice one in my mind.
Oh, then you should start.
Okay. I was going to go on the topic in general of tagging places on Instagram. And this is pro tagging, just because I figured...
So the conversation of gatekeeping.
Can I ask a question about that? When you say pro tagging, can you elaborate on specifically what you're tagging? As in,
oh, for sure.
I've heard people say, tag the wilderness area, but not the specific trailhead, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is, again, like I said in the beginning of the episode, underslept, cranky, and have a lot of opinions both ways. This one is probably not what you guys think I'm going to argue about, but in terms of pro tagging, specifically where you are, like on hikes or things like that, I have found that very useful, and I actually, not to be a hypocrite to my last sentence, used that to look into hikes that I've done that are day hikes pretty frequently. Like, you check your maps, you check your different things, you check whatever you need to check, and I'll also go on and I'll check Instagram and I'll look up the place, especially in Colorado when it's shoulder season with like winter or spring, because you can go to the recently posted, not like the top posted, but the recently posted of that place, and you get like, random people that have like 40 followers, but their account's public and they just took a picture with their dog and it's not artsy or creative or whatever, but it'll tell me, okay, like I should, that's how much snow is left on the trail or this and that. And like, obviously that's not the only way to judge it, but if you're looking at people that are not, super experienced backpackers or super artsy Instagrammers, and they're showing pictures of their hike and like the tree they liked and like that view over there and this and that, you can get a good idea for what that trail that you're about to go do your day hike on looked like yesterday, looked like 6 hours ago, looked like, 12 hours ago, and it's untouched a lot of, than a lot of produced videos or a lot of produced reels or things that people, for example, like myself, might post where I put a lot of editing into it. So I find that really useful for that reason, and it's specifically from people that aren't trying to do that.
Yeah, I would say for day hiking, that is a good application of it.
It's like a segue from backpacking, but...
We're talking about backpacking.
Yeah, I know. I just like that part. I think, we're going to say a lot of negative things, and that part I really enjoy.
I think, too, I see the pros. So I feel like a lot of the arguments around tagging specific locations kind of go back to, honestly, what we were talking about before, where people feel that people who they deem as less, quote-unquote, educated about the outdoors end up in places because they saw it on Instagram. Things get overcrowded and then there's trash or whatever because people haven't done their due diligence. But I think that goes back to your point, Chance, that I don't feel like Instagram is the reason that we have overuse or that we have, people who may not know what to do on trails. It might be, a personal responsibility to do more research. And also maybe we need more resources. The outdoors has kind of blown up in the last year because we didn't have a lot of other things to do. And I think rather than being upset that there's more people at the trailhead, maybe we figure out how we dedicate more resources to maintaining trails that we love and getting more people out there that, could love the outdoors just as much as we do, rather than being upset that there's more people out there.
Yeah, this is a really loaded conversation, and actually I don't even see it in our outline. So I think it's worth delving into more, because usually when people are talking about what Chance is talking about, it's around the issue of gatekeeping, right? About oftentimes it comes back to keeping underprivileged communities away from these places by not letting you know where it is. They can't access it because they don't know. They see it on Instagram, but they don't know where it is. Whereas the other side of that is people don't want to share where it is because they're worried that it's going to bring out a less educated group of people and they're going to trash it. They don't know, leave no trace. It's going to become overcrowded, this, that, and the other. I think it's a really interesting conversation because it's hard to agree so hard with one side or the other. Like at worst, you have to understand both sides of the conversation. I take issue with people, especially like prominent Instagram accounts, who take the stance of like, let's not share the precise location, because I think that's very selfish. They're trading attention by visiting these places and then not allowing the people who are following them, giving them the access to, giving them the stature in the community that they're after, but not paying the favor forward by letting people know how to access these places. So they're trading their popularity for getting to these places without reciprocating anything whatsoever.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's so nuanced because I think at the same point, who knows what kind of research they did to go there, I have done a lot of internal debate about this specific subject and have landed somewhere in the middle, I would say, in the sense that if someone asks me about a location, I'll always tell them. And usually I'll try and say in a nice way, like, I hope you're familiar with Leave No Trace here, especially if it's someone I don't know. I recommend looking into that before you go, and here's where I was. But instead of posting it publicly, because I think there are people who don't necessarily apply critical thinking all the time on Instagram, I'll put maybe the wilderness area or like the state or something like that, because I think everyone is very capable of doing their own research. Like, I like to believe that people can go, on the internet and say, oh, that looked really pretty. It was in Colorado. And I mean, there's tons of beautiful trails in Colorado. So, if one specific Instagram post takes off and everyone wants to go to that one lake, I think that can create like a concentrated, I'd be so curious to see a study on that. Like, does it actually create a concentrated traffic to that one trail? Or is it just happen to be that like a bunch of people learned about that trail and they really wanted to go, and is it specifically attributed to Instagram? I'm kind of ranting, but
I'm open to having my mind change on this, but my thought is like, if you hike to this place and you think it's so pristine and you want to keep it a secret, the easiest way to do that is to not post it on Instagram. Like I feel
Absolutely.
like a lot of people want the attention of like, look at me at this beautiful place, and then not posting the location is like, but you can't. And that just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
But I also think, posting the location isn't an obligation, I wouldn't say. But like I said, if someone wants to ask, I'll fill you in. I don't mind. But yeah,
posting the location is not enough. This has nothing tied to it in terms of either or other. But on that note, posting the location is not an obligation. Choosing to post a location that says you're not going to post your location is a choice.
Yes, I think there's a nuance there even. Yeah, because like to Zach's point, if you're kind of like the tag responsibly, keep wherever wild specifically comes to mind. It's like, hey, look at this beautiful thing I did, but yeah, I think that's like, it's almost, it's like, just don't tag anything if that's how you feel. Personally, that's how I would approach it. But I think obviously the other side of the conversation is, does that increase the traffic? And I would argue that increasing traffic is probably a good thing for all of us right now.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, because the more that people get outdoors, the more that they see, the more that they learn, the more that they want to protect those places as well. I think, maybe I'm naive and assuming the positive in people too much, but like, I think a lot of times when places are quote unquote trashed or people leave things, I think it boils down to they genuinely don't know the effects, that comes down to even like little known leave no trace things, like thinking that biodegradable items are okay to like discard in the backcountry. Intuitively you would think, oh, it's biodegradable, but if you toss an orange peel in a place that doesn't have an orange tree that's not native to that area, it can cause problems. Obviously trash on the ground, people should know that causes a problem, but I think maybe people don't realize to what extent, and also maybe don't realize, in the city or wherever you are, you're used to that not being a big deal because it eventually gets cleaned up, I guess, maybe is the thought process. I'm, again, going on down a rabbit hole, but I think that I like to believe that genuinely people don't realize the effects sometimes of the things they do in places because they just don't know yet. And maybe we just all need to be better stewards.
I have so many thoughts that actually tie back to that. And this is another one that I can really start spiraling on, so I'm just going to keep it calm. But I think, like, the argument that tagging somewhere will cause more people to go and overuse and all of that, I don't really love that either, because I think what happens is people go to a place so much, or they spend so much time in a place, that on the positive side, they grow, like, a love for it, and they want to take care of it, and they want to see it be taken care of, and that's all very positive. But on another side of it, they start to feel like some part of that is theirs. This is my spot. This is my mountain. This is my rock climbing. This is my, backyard that I go in for this and that. And, like, unless you own that property's not yours. It's public for a lot of reasons, and that's so that everyone can enjoy it. If we get to the point where everyone enjoying it means that the place is going to see too much wear and tear, I'm all for permits. I'm all for paid permits. If somewhere is getting enough traction where it's, hey, we can't all enjoy this, well, who chooses the hierarchy of, well, you got there first, so you enjoy it while I sit here and don't get that experience? Though, if you institute paid permits for places and do that sort of thing, you can take that money and you can put it towards things like educating the people that go there, creating signage maybe at the road, not in the, wherever, but at the road so that they can see it. Here's pamphlets that have leave no trace in them that you can get when you park. Whatever it might be that lets you spread the word about how to use that spot more responsibly, that can have funding from the problem of overuse and the problem of people going there. But I don't think that stopping people from going there or stopping a place from getting popular because it's yours and it's, your secret spot and this and that, like, that's not what public land is.
I also would argue that because it's not what public land is, I have very mixed feelings about permits as well, and specifically paid permits, because I think they are exclusionary not everyone, like there's already so many hurdles, I feel like, financially to getting into the backcountry. I know everyone wants to say nature is free, blah, 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 but specifically paid permits are not free. And, getting to the trailhead, the gas money is not free. A lot of trailheads have paid parking. There's all sorts of things. Like, do you even have a car to get to the trailhead? Like, that's all expensive already. So I don't know what the solution is necessarily. I don't have, an education in that background, but I think paid permits, to argue the other side of that, public land is public for a reason, and putting paid permits can really create an extra obstacle.
Okay, I'll hit you with a flip side. I'm not like, this is where the flip flop comes, because I'm not like set in any way. Like, I'm not saying like that's the definitive solution, but if that's a counter, then you could do something like, here's a 1-page sheet we're giving you on Leave No Trace. On the back, there's 10 bubbles. Bubble in what you read. It's on the other side. Hand it back. Welcome.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, the Forest Service websites, if you look at, pretty much any wilderness area in Colorado, they have all that information on there. And yeah, so maybe it's less about paid permits, but more about more information, like more information on the trailheads. And maybe we need, more public funding, in the sense of like, I'm going to get really controversial. Do we need a $3 trillion military budget, or can we put like $1 million towards our parks?
Yeah, that retweet. In terms of like the website, like I can play your side of it with the website, and like it all being available online is then you need access to online.
Agreed. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So it's like, if our goal is let everyone in fairly, maybe you won't get to go the day you want to go. Maybe you have to wait a day. And hey, here's this paper. You can read everything about it right here. Just fill out the second form, hand it back. You're welcome to come in. And again, that might not be the perfect thing, but there are options that we can definitely go down different paths for and find, like, okay, this doesn't work in this way. This part works. Let's put it with this part, where you don't have to exclude people, but you also don't have to be that jerk that's like, this is my rock. No one else.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's a very toxic mentality.
Yeah. So to bring it back, because I think this is a huge conversation. We could have a different panel on this entirely, but to bring it back to the social media thing, like, my thought is, like, if you want a place to be pristine, the simplest solution is just don't post it to Instagram. Like, I think you kind of come across as an asshole by like withholding the location specifically because you want the attention from being at that place without letting other people know anything about that place. My 2 cents on the matter.
I see where you're coming from.
Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, and I don't have a strong opinion on this because I am removed from it, but I think you guys might have some interesting thoughts, is the whole conversation around being an Instagram influencer. I know this isn't social media at large. We can, I think, discount YouTube just for the sake of keeping the conversation manageable. But yeah, Instagram influencing. So I think it'd be cool to talk about some of the potential pros and cons, because like within any of this stuff, it's got 2 sides of the coin. So I don't know the right way to go about this, but I think we can address some of the obvious pros, and then maybe the 2 of you can weigh in on this. Obviously, Chauncey is big in the influencer world.
I have no thoughts on this, sorry.
But I think some of the benefits, some of the obvious, or maybe less obvious benefit, this one might be, is some of the additional serendipity that being an influencer can bring. Like, you're exposed to a bigger audience, people are engaged with what you're doing, and that can bring additional trail magic or resources or whatever that might be. Agree, disagree? I mean, no, Chauncey's default right now is disagree.
Well, the question is, can it bring those things?
Does it bring those things?
I think if you want to use it for that.
If you want it, it can be there.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I'm someone who I stagger all my stuff because I don't want that,
Sure.
And that doesn't make me not an influencer, because I'm sure, obviously everyone knows that's not the case, but it doesn't go hand in hand. Like, you're choosing to appreciate that potential, or you're choosing that part of it might not be for me. There's a million different facets to it that you could choose to play into or not. That one's personally not for me. But is it possible? Yes. Is it available? Yes.
Okay. I think a big one, and maybe this is one that attracts the majority of people is the potential financial benefit. And some people have had the ability to turn this into careers. Not so much in the thru hiking world, but like in pretty much every other vertical, you see influencers who do this sort of thing full time.
I love that you're just pausing and waiting for my input. Yeah, I've got thoughts on this. And this is, again, like you'd think like, oh, you would have like a solidified opinion on this. Nope, I don't. Because like, okay, when did I become an influencer? I don't know. I had an Instagram account. It was private in my college time, and then I went on a road trip and I made it not private, and that was like, didn't even, you know, it was me and my friend sitting in the front seat of the car being like, should we push on private? And we did. And then I got put on that Trek 2017 Instagram people that you should follow. And I got to, I think I was at like 500 followers before then. I got to 1,000, and I was like, neat, 4 digits. And then I went on the PCT, and I got to Northern California, and I really wanted a fanny pack. And I saw one on this company that I liked, and I couldn't afford that kind of just splurge item. And so I messaged them, and I was like, hey, and I was so nervous. I was like, hey, if I posted photos of me hiking with it for the rest of my hike, like, I know that's not much, but like, would you be willing to send me one? And to this day, I love that company because like they were willing to, and I don't know why, but they were willing to. They sent me one, and I was like, oh my God, this is great. And like, I don't email companies asking for gear ever these days. It's just like, that was something where I was like, oh, I really want this thing, and I can't afford it, and I wonder if they'll trade photos for it. Because in my mind, I come from a graphic design background. I've done photography for weddings. I've done videography for weddings. I know how much that stuff costs. And when you're staging a photo shoot and you're staging a video shoot and that sort of thing, for me, I charge for that outside of hiking. Why would I not charge for that in hiking? You know, why would I charge that at your wedding and I wouldn't charge that in the backcountry? So, you know, that's a different thing. But at this point, I'm hiking the PCT. I get this fanny pack, and I'm like, okay, cool. And God, I don't even know what the first post I took money on was for, but it was like, oh my God, they're going to give me something for doing this work. And it's like, that's cool, because like I've been saying no to a lot of like gear trades because it is a lot of work for me to get out there and do this, and I don't want a piece of gear that I already have sitting in my closet. And then at some point you get like DMs that people hate you, and like you get these topics on, you know, panels where it's like, is this a problem? And it's like, when did I even become this? I'm just like, you know, enjoying my social media time, and people keep following because they like my photos, and that makes my self-esteem feel good, but then they also say things that make my self-esteem not feel good. And, you know, I get these cool brands that I get to work with, and I get like these experiences that I'd never have, and it's a way to use a part of my talent and something I paid a lot of money to go to school for that I'm, you know, took a long time to pay back. And is it like, am I a crazy person for charging for something that I paid for to acquire? And it's just like, when do you become an influencer? And when, you know, like, I'm not someone that's, I know people that will, you know, try to find other people's brands they work with and message them and like go behind people's backs. Like, I've heard it all, and I want nothing to do with it. But it's like, now I'm in this lump, and I'm just here trying to live my life. You know, so
I wasn't. The intent was not for it to be so charged, and I know that there's some things pushing like those buttons.
That all has to be said first, so that when I give opinions on things, you have to know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Because that is my background to this. So when I give opinions, it's from that perspective. Someone that's just like looking around like, holy shit, what happened?
Yeah, you didn't set out to be an Instagram influencer. It happened.
And I mean, that's not to say it's not great. Like, it's freaking great. I like it. Like, it's so good that every day on trail I'll post a photo and I'll go to bed, and I can like see people encouraging me and like get motivation, and that, you know, people, you know, reach out and say they enjoyed the podcast or they enjoyed following my hike. Like, that feels great. I'm not going to lie about it. But that wasn't like what I intended for when I sat in the front of that pickup truck in 2013 and like nervously pushed unprivate, you know?
Yeah, but there is a business element to it as well, because like I know you're very astute with like the analytic tools that tell you your engagement rate, and like there's marketplaces where companies can even find you in the first place. Like, I know it's not as simple as just being like, this brand found me and they give me money.
And that's not what I'm trying to say. I just want the listeners to know the backstory on my general thoughts from my perspective, from my channel, so that when I give these these opinions. It's not like, oh, that's not true or that doesn't apply. This is the perspective that I'm coming from, and when I'm giving my opinions to these questions that are going to come up, it's from that background that I'm giving them with.
Sure. Yeah. And I think an argument for you is like, and this is something that you were mentioning before we recorded, is, people work a lot of soul-sucking jobs to be able to afford a thru hike, and I think do things that maybe aren't as aligned with their character as some of the things that maybe some people are shitting on influencers for promoting on their own Instagram feed. So it seems like there's a little bit of hypocrisy, and like maybe people feel that Instagram is their sacred space and there shouldn't ever be corporate influence on their feed. And if you feel that way, I guess I'm sorry for you.
Why
but
did you choose to push the follow button?
Also, it's a multi-billion-dollar social media tool. Like, don't pretend like there's not money involved in this thing.
I counted one day. If you scroll through your Instagram feed, every 3 to 5 posts is a sponsored ad from Instagram. It's not your feed.
Unless you're lucky and there's a really small subgroup. Sorry to take away from this.
No,
I don't get Instagram ads.
Why?
And now that I said that out loud, they're going to start serving them to me. Apparently, I brought this up at work recently, and someone was like, there's this really small test group of people who don't get them. And I got lucky.
I guess they have to have some sort of control to see if you engage differently with it, or like when they make 4 ads for Chance and 5 ads for me, like how much does that discourage me from participating or whatever it might be. That's interesting. I'm jealous.
Life hack.
Yeah. And by the way, I very sincerely am not trying to make this a charged conversation. I just think
I'm down to go down it.
Yeah.
I just want to set the foundation before I go down it. I'm not charged at you. I'm charged at the lack of sleep and the general arguments I've been having all day.
Yeah. So I guess instead of me outlining the bullets of the potential pros, because this is just me guessing, quite honestly, I'm not an influencer. I would love to get your, or maybe even Elise's input, because I think Elise is emerging in this world. And it seems like something that you are interested in. You're very good at posting consistently, and I think you do have really interesting posts. You're not always just here's me at a mountain. You have interesting angles at the way that you come about things. So I'm curious to get your guys' take on some of the benefits of, whether you're huge or growing or whatever it might be, some of the benefits of trying to grow your presence on, again, specifically Instagram.
Okay. Trying to grow your presence is the part where...
Or just having a large presence.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my thought. Okay, we're just doing this. There's so many thoughts that I need to filter out the ones that are for other questions and focus on just this one. Some of the pros of having a large presence. You get to work with really cool brands, I got to work with Ace Hardware, and I got to build a desk with them last year. I got to go into the store, and they walked me around to all the wood sections, and I brought in 2 paper plates where I measured out and drew an idea I thought was cool, and they literally gave me everything I needed to go home and make that a reality as someone who has no woodworking skills. And for me, that was such a fun project that I never would have been able to take on my own. And I severely needed a new desk because I had just switched to work from home. And the fact that I got all the tools I needed, which are not cheap.
Not cheap at all.
The wood I needed, which is not cheap. And now, 1.5 years later, I'm still using this desk, and it's something useful. And I go into Ace, and I know them, and they say hi to me. This isn't an ad for Ace. This is just an example.
Ace is the place of the...
Oh, it's so funny. I was recording a video when I was building the desk, and my friend was in the background going, ass is the plus, ass is... And she was singing ass, plus, ass, plus. It was very funny. But you get to work with really cool brands, and it's if anyone walked up to you and was like, hey, do you want to go backstage and help Beyonce get mic'd up? You're not going to be no. You're going to be Ace Hardware? Ace is the place? Yeah, that sounds so cool. And so it's nice because it's people like to watch my hikes, and I get to do cool things like this that I'd never be able to do because people like my pictures. And that's wild that one thing leads to another, but that's cool, and I'm not going to argue it because it's I don't really get how that leads to that, but it's really cool for me, and I like it.
Fair enough.
I think you brought up a good point earlier, too, that there is inherent value in whether or not you're someone who appreciates that is another story. But from an advertising perspective, you have that background of knowing what looks good, having the skills to produce good content, even if that's not necessarily your goal to grow an audience for that purpose, but you do have those skills. And so inherently that's what follows. And brands recognize that. And as someone who works on the brand side as my like 9 to 5, I don't necessarily work with influencers all that much, but like I do a lot of social in my 9 to 5. And yeah, like there's a dollar value that goes with that, even if that's not what the purpose of the account is, or if that's not what the person set out to do in the first place.
And that was where I almost like went off tangent in the beginning, and I'm trying to figure out where's smart to input these bits of info, because I think they're all relevant to the bigger picture and worth knowing as we debate this. But like as you said, with like, okay, well, you're still very in touch with the marketing side, with the analytics, with the numbers. You have to be. And it's like, at least knows from the brand side, but I know from the doing professional photography and videography for wedding side of it, you need to know how to price out your services. And as someone who like doesn't like to sound uneducated when I'm sending a business email, I don't want a company that emails me, like for example, Ace that I want to work with, asks for my rates on something and to send back a number that has no thought behind it. So I need to know what my engagement rates are. I need to know what that number is. So I know that I'm being paid fairly for the amount of work I'm doing, because a lot of times, and this goes into a completely separate tangent of how you can be feeling really depressed and, isolated and not wanting to go outside, and then you have this shoot you have to do that forces you to go on a hike, and, because it's like, okay, I have to go here to take this photo shoot because this is where I made the, it's like filming a movie. You choose a site location, you choose props, you bring gear to take the photos, you go home and you spend time in post editing them. Like, yeah, it's not a 4K like feature film, but it takes a lot of time and effort, money on gas to even drive out to the spot. Sometimes you need to there's a lot of things to coordinate. You got to coordinate people to go if it's going to be something that you're not shooting as a selfie. And it's like, A, I want to make sure I'm being compensated fairly because it's a lot of work, but B, I want to make sure you're getting the right value out of it too. I want to make sure that if you're willing to pay me for this, I'm not misleading you by saying, hey, this is how much you'll get out of it, pay me this much, and then you find out, hey, I didn't return all of that. We don't tell advertisers we put out X amount of listeners for downloads when we don't have it, because we want to be fair. And it's like, you have to know all this stuff, and then it's like a spiral where it's like, now I'm in the middle of it and know all of it, but long-winded story of there's a lot that goes into it that's not just take a picture, post a picture, and I think that's where a problem comes in, is people think that it's that simple.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that starts to dive into more of Zach's topic of potential pros and cons.
We'll get there. There's so many things to let people know about.
Well, so this is something that I've definitely weighed a lot personally, because just to be super real with y'all, I do post pretty consistently, or at least I think if I truly wanted to really grow, I'd have to dedicate even more time to it, and sometimes it feels like a lot to take on. But obviously, I put hashtags on my posts. I wouldn't do that if I didn't expect it to go to more people. And so I've really spent time, especially recently, thinking about, okay, do I actually want to grow my Instagram? What is the purpose of that? What do I want to convey to people? Why am I putting myself out there? And, that I think that's all things to consider if you are thinking about that. And I think the pros that I often weigh are, kind of what I spoke about earlier. I saw other people backpacking, and it changed the course of my life, and it really inspired me and got me to, try backpacking by myself for the first time, specifically seeing other women going solo. If you don't have those examples in your personal life, where else do you turn, And so I think about that a lot when I'm posting things and trying to make it seem more approachable without making it seem like, you don't need to do any research. Mm-hmm. And maybe even I think in the future, I've been thinking about being more informational with it rather than just posting pretty pictures, because that's fun and all, but what are the nuts and bolts of how you actually get out there? And so that's something I've been thinking about. And then I think a lot of the things we've talked about, the potential cons, is, people don't really realize what goes into it. And I think there's almost a jealousy factor sometimes, where if people see your account growing, they're like, well, I'm doing way cooler stuff. Why isn't my account growing? And it's, well, yeah, you might be doing way cooler stuff than I am, but how are you putting that out to the world? In full transparency, like I said, my 9 to 5 is in social media. So I know way too much about this stuff.
Yeah. It's also, Instagram is a visual medium. So like, it's not about doing the coolest stuff. It's about having the best visual medium. Exactly.
And and there's so much I still want to learn about that, just because I think storytelling is an incredible thing. And like just wanting to get better at photography, and that's a whole nother rant. But I think also, sorry, I just want to get this thought out, but a potential con is I do see kind of like that lack of critical thinking again being applied to people who are in the public eye, and a lot of people directing, like misplaced anger, I guess I would say, at people who are just choosing to share things publicly that I think can have a lot of benefit for a lot of people. But then in the long run, some people for whatever reason don't like it, and they choose to like direct their misplaced rage at this public figure. And that is something that I consider when I'm thinking about this. Like, do I want to even open myself up to like the opinions of the masses? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's something I find interesting, because you use the word public figure. And it's like, anyone that knows me in real life, like, I'm not a public figure.
Yes,
and I know that's not what you're saying. Yeah. But that's the part where, and this is why it's relevant, is that people treat it like you are. Like,
well, like that you're not a human being behind.
Right, and it's like people can be so cruel, as like a con of it. Like, people can be so cruel. I made the hardest decision to switch past the Sierra, for example, which you'll hear us talk about in the last episode if you haven't heard it yet. And Woodchuck even started crying about it, because she was talking about the girl who drowned in the river 2 weeks ahead of me, which I referenced in my YouTube videos when I flipped as something that scared the shit out of me, because we were the same size and weight. And still, when I got to Canada, it was like bombardments of messages about how I need to keep in mind I'm a failure, I didn't complete my goal, this is worth, like, all kinds of shit. And it's like, people don't, like, again, this goes back to people. Like, people are the problem. Like, you don't understand, like, I'm not a public figure. I'm not Kim Kardashian. I'm not, like, someone that's, like, actually, like, you wouldn't get sued for slandering me. Like, I'm not someone that you can parody. Like, I don't know how all those rules work, but you know what I'm talking about, where, like, famous enough people you can get away with some stuff with. Like, you don't realize I wake up in a small little apartment every day. I sit at a desk for 8.5 hours, and I make some food if I'm feeling ambitious. I pet my dog, I watch a show, and oftentimes I go back to bed. Like, there is nothing public figure about me. And people in my life that don't know I hike do not know that there's even a reason to think there might be. And I think a negative part is that you're right, we do treat people like they are all of a sudden public figures because they've got a number next to their name. And it's like,
devil's advocate, you definitely are a public figure. anyone who posts publicly on Instagram is I'm a public figure. Like, I put myself out on a podcast, therefore I'm a public figure. Like, anytime you're making your content accessible to a public audience, you're a public figure. I know that you're not Kim Kardashian, but I think all of us in this room are public figures by like the loosest definition.
But by the loosest definition, yes. But it's like I think the people that watch us like don't, especially, and I'm talking about Instagram and like on hikes, and like when you watch us do our hikes, like they like almost lose the human aspect of it. Like, you're no longer
social media. Again, this is I think we're talking about cons. Totally,
and I think for sure it's easy to say too, if you don't want that feedback or you don't want all those negative messages, then then don't be public. But I think then that goes back to the pros, because you're thinking about do the cons outweigh the pros? And then for some people it does, and some people it doesn't, and then that's a personal choice. And also, I would argue, sorry, really quick point, that like Kim Kardashian even has feelings, and I think it goes back to being a human and like the misplaced rage. It's just do I like Kim Kardashian? I mean, I don't really have that many opinions on her, because honestly it doesn't affect my life too much, so I don't go out of my way to like hate on her. And I think there is something to be said if you're going out of your way to hate on someone because you don't like something they posted on social media, unless it was literally specifically directed at you and very harmful or harmful in another way, maybe reconsider why you're spending so much time on that.
Yeah. It's one thing to attack someone's argument. What happens most of the time is they attack the person.
Exactly.
And it's a reflection, like hurt people. When someone's in a bad place in their own life, they're going to lash out. Like, trolls are people who are generally unhappy with their lives, and that's where that stems from.
One almost without exception. I have on the public figure thing is like, not saying like we're not in some capacity public figures, but again, jumping back to my spiel in the beginning of pushing that public button to, asking for a fanny pack to where I am now. at what point are you a public enough figure where it's like, well, I brought this on myself, you know, this is the cons of what I'm doing, you know, like,
yeah.
I think when you post anything to the internet that is publicly consumable, honestly, like if I remember I posted a YouTube video before I left for the AT. I was just making a joke about how inept I was at backpacking. And I remember I got a comment being like, who's this? I'm going to say a inflammatory word. This is not my word. Somebody said this to me. Who's this faggot talking about chafing? Like, this was like one of the first comments I ever got on YouTube. This is before anybody knew who I was.
But there's got to be a point, because there is a point. There is a point where if you are, yes, if you're posting anything on social media, in a sense, you're a public figure. But there is a part where something down in terms of a following count, you're a private person, and it's cyberbullying. And you get to a follower count, and that up is like, well, you're a public figure. You know, like, what do you expect?
I would disagree. I think that might depend on the specific person, but, you know, whether or not that they agree with that. But I think that regardless, it's being mean to someone.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's semantics.
But the point is, like, it's like, you can't say, like, well, if you're on Instagram, you're a public figure, and you're opening yourself up for negativity, because then it's like,
but I think, I think the reality is you kind of are.
Yes.
And whether or not people should do that is different than whether or not you are opening yourself up to it. And I think that's basically, what I weigh.
I guess where I'm torn is, it's like, okay, it's a con, it comes with the territory, this and that. And it's like, in the conversation of this being a con, for someone like me, where this is my trajectory from 200 followers to 28,000 followers, like, if I'm looking at that as it's happening, like, at what point is it like, oh, I'm all of a sudden, like, you know, in this realm where, like, this becomes more acceptable, or, you know, anything like that. Like, where is it where it's like, well, if you want to change it, get out of it. Like, make your own, you know, like.
Well, I don't think it's ever acceptable. And I wouldn't say that they're just offering my opinion, that the responsibility is on you at, you know, people are going to be people. It's just a matter of, like, do you want to keep putting up with it? And if you do, it's just like, I think it's a reality of being on the internet as unfortunately.
Totally agreed. Mm-hmm. Whether you have 1 or 1 million follower, like, at the point that you're posting anything publicly, like, you're saying I'm open to being trolled.
I've had people reach out to me, not even based on, and this is one really rare instance, but I was telling the story recently, so it's fresh. But I posted a gut hook comment.
Like, your gut hook comment get trolled?
Yes. Full story. So it's October in Washington.
Yeah.
Obviously, shit has hit the fan. It's freaking snowing. I'm looking at the map that day, and there's this alternate that you can take, like, going into Leavenworth, if anyone's familiar with the area. And I was like, Josh, my boyfriend, should we take this alternate? It cuts off 4 miles. Like, today is miserable. And he was like, you know what? It's rainy, it's slippery. The alternate specifically said, you know, it's not a maintained trail and it's kind of scrambly. At that point, we felt pretty confident in our hiking abilities, but he was like, I just feel like that's kind of sketch. So as we're hiking up the actual pass that is on the PCT, we hear all these rock falls, just like across the way. Like, it's in the distance, we can't see it. Crest the pass, and we look over to the wall of the path that we would have taken. You see this giant, because it's snowing, you see this giant, like, clear spot where all this rock has fallen and there's no snow. And that's how we could tell that's exactly where it was. And we were like, wow, we were going to be on that alternate literally as these rocks were falling. Thank God we didn't do that. And so I get into town and I was like, you know, other people might have this thought of trying to cut it short because the weather freaking sucks and whatever. So I left a comment. I was like, this alternate is not safe anymore this season. Like, we've heard all these rock falls, saw a rock fall, just don't take it. Some guy finds me like over a year later in like August and messages me on Instagram. So he found my Instagram from my gut hook username. And this is like 15 miles from town. So he like had this in his head.
Just ruminating.
He was like, I got to message this girl when I get into service. Messages me and is like, sends me a picture, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember all the details, but he's basically like ranting at me like, not safe this season, my ass, like blah, 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 blah. And I was like, are you talking about my comment from October of 2019? And so, yeah, so just to point out, like, if you're going to post anything publicly on the internet.
Yeah, that's wild, though. I've never seen a
it was really,
hazed.
Really excessive. But, and so that's an extreme example. But
yes. One final point that I'll make before we switch on to something else is like
Actually, I have a lot more that I want to get into.
Yeah, I'm just trying to limit myself because I can really go all day. In reply to the second you post anything publicly on social media, you're opening yourself up for negative feedback. Doesn't make it okay, but you're opening yourself up to it. There has to be a point. There has to be a line somewhere. I don't know where it is, but like my mom posts pictures of my dad's gardens on Instagram and her account's public, and I'm pretty sure if someone was like, Sarah, those garden vegetables are fucking ugly, you know, like she'd be devastated. She wouldn't be like, well, I opened myself up to this by having an Instagram. She'd be like, oh my God, you know, like there has to be a point where people start to think it's more acceptable.
I don't think this is a point even worth arguing. I understand that you're hung up on this, but I think we're derailing the conversation at this point. Yeah,
completely. Okay. I just think that like that's why it's hard to pick a side, is because it's like if you're gonna pick a concrete feeling towards it, you have to be able to define where that comes in, and it's like it's so hard because social media is so broad and used for so many different things, and there's so many different aspects of it that it's like hard to narrow.
So one example to Elisa's point, when you put a hashtag on anything, you're then saying that you want it exposed to a larger audience. Like you're not hashtagging it for the people that are following you. You're hashtagging it for people that are searching the hashtag, which is a public audience. So you can make that argument that if you're using a hashtag, you're trying to engage with the public. I still don't think it's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, no, we're good.
I would say, to sum it up, pros, yeah, you can make money. You can meet people. You can get free stuff. Just like anything, though, it's work, and there are cons, like just like a 9 to 5.
So I'd actually like to talk more about because these are things I'm curious about, and I actually can speak to this a little bit, not as directly as an influencer, but during my 2017 PCT hike, I'm hiking with arguably the biggest influencer in the thru hiking world, or at least I think he was at the time, Viking, obviously. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that like I didn't enjoy the attention that came to me through both his Instagram and to my own Instagram. Like it's fun to be the center of attention. I try to actively steer away from it because I don't think that's necessarily centered to my personality. But at the time, like I definitely thrived off of it. So with that, I think came a lot of negative things that I don't necessarily strive after today.
I'm sorry, I have a thought. When I was on the PCT, I was hiking with a guy named Chocolate Balls, who YouTubed his videos, was way more popular than I was on Instagram, like no competition. And he was in our hiking group, and I felt the same way, dude. People would show up on trail and be there with like Trail Magic, and I'd feed off of it. Like the best meal I had on trail was this guy that took us to have tacos with his family that was there on a reunion, and it was fantastic. And they were all there for Chocolate Balls. It was great. When they're there for you, it's very stressful because there's like this obligation that you have to entertain. Like almost you're like a performing monkey and they're like waiting for you to dance. And you're like,
I think this is a really interesting point to bring up because this is maybe should be something that you have to ask yourself before you decide if you want to go down this route, because me and Viking couldn't be more different about this. Like when somebody comes up to him, they're like, you're the real hiking Viking. And I've seen this, I'm not exaggerating, no fewer than 100 times. Like it happens at Red Rocks. It happens at the airport. It happens he's recognized everywhere. It's not just on trail. He thrives off of it. Like he loves having those conversations with people. He'll go drink a beer with like he legitimately loves the engagement, and it's not, he's not fabricating it. Like he legitimately thrives off of it. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. And like it happens a lot more regularly nowadays, specifically because of the podcast. And like I'm always flattered by it. I'm never like, fuck you, blah, blah, blah. But it's just not innate to me. Like I don't thrive off of the attention. I don't know how to handle it.
The part for me, like it's not like I don't like meeting the person. It's not like, oh my God, I'm ungrateful. You know, like I just want stuff. I don't want to meet the person or anything. But if we're keeping it in a backpacking sense, the part of it that stresses me so much out so much compared to what it was like with Chocolate Balls is when it's someone else that they're going there for, you're not obligated to stay. You're not obligated to have any of it. You're not obligated to do anything. And I know you're not obligated either if you like show up and they're there for you and they have stuff. But for me, I'm a slow hiker. It takes me all day start to finish to get to the end of the day. Sometimes I plan days where I'm really cutting it close and I'm limiting my breaks. And if I come up to someone who's planned Trail Magic and they're hoping to see me and they're there and they're excited, I feel like I have to stay for a bit. I feel like an asshole if I say, oh, sorry, I can't stop. You have to stop. And then if you're going to take something from them, you have to entertain them with some stories. Again, it's like, you know, do a little dance, you know, like entertain them a bit. And that makes me so stressed out on trail specifically, because it's like, well, I'm going to fall behind my group. I'm going to end up hiking at night. I don't want to hike at night, like, but I don't want to be rude. And like, it just builds all this internal conflict that doesn't need to be there. And that's a big reason why a reason is for safety reasons. There's a endless reasons, but a big reason for why I stagger stuff is that there are times where you'll come up on people 2 to 3 times a day, and it's like, I can't afford to take breaks 2 to 3 times a day, and I can't hear that you drove an hour to get to this trailhead hoping that you'd see us and only stay for 30 minutes when you spent longer in the car one way coming here. You know, and it's like a huge pressure. It's like having a family member visit you on trail unplanned, and all of a sudden you're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah. I think that's a really important question to ask yourself before you decide if this is something you want to pursue, is how comfortable you are with the attention. And I do think that there's a different element to it as a solo female backpacker, because there's more danger involved with it. Like, I could probably defend myself in more situations. That being said, like, I'm not innately in love with the attention either. And like, the more frequently it happens, I don't know. I watch Viking handle it, and like, that guy was built to be a celebrity. Like, not only is he very like amenable with these people, but he genuinely loves it. If you see Viking out in the wild, go say hey, bring him a beer. He's gonna love it.
That's how it should be.
Bring me a beer, because that's the only way that I'll be able to handle the interaction.
I mean, like, it should be genuine though. It shouldn't be like me forcing a conversation to try to feel like I've done my part. Like, someone like Viking, like, that is his freaking environment, you know? Like, it would be unfair to the other person for me to like put on a persona I'm not and like be someone I'm not just to entertain you for a bit and then like go on with my exhausting day and try to put in miles.
I also do think that they're similar to receiving hateful comments on Instagram. Like, putting yourself out there does open you up to more of these public interactions. Less so, I think that's way more out of line than somebody commenting. Like, obviously, like, you can just brush off a comment very easily. When somebody approaches you, there is like the physical element, which I think crosses a very different line. But that being said, like, if you don't want those interactions, that is a consequence of being a public figure.
One thing I've liked, and I've that's not to say I haven't liked meeting people on trail, and I haven't like met people on trail or anything like that. Like, one of my best stays on the Smoky or on the AT was after the Smokies. I stayed with a family. They actually hosted Twinkle too, and they hosted us when we got out of the Smokies. We had pizza. It was fantastic. They were so sweet. We met their family. They messaged me about it a couple weeks in advance, and they're like, hey, can you let us know when you get close? We'd love to do this. No pressure if not. And we played it by ear with our schedule. It worked out. We messaged them. It happened. And there are plenty of messages just like those where the timing wasn't right. You know, whatever it was, I didn't have someone with me that would have come, where I just didn't answer the message, or I said, thank you, but it's not going to work out right now. That's different than just showing up, you know?
Totally.
But yeah, you know, like, that's a pro and a con, is when those experiences happen and they work out, it's fantastic. I'm still in touch with that woman today.
Yeah.
But it can also be incredibly stressful.
And I think that goes back to things that some people that have been on the podcast before have talked about, whether or not they share their up-to-date location. Yeah.
So there are a couple more, I think, negative, at least questions that I have. And I think some of this is specific to being an influencer, and some of it is more broad to like influencer culture. Specifically to being an influencer can it feel at times like it's detracting from the hike itself? Like, do you feel like I have to treat this like a job, even though like I'm not inspired to post? I know that to maximize my engagement or to get my daily followers or whatever it might be. Is there times where like it's otherwise you feel like you'd be more present with the trail experience?
It depends on the person. For me, I like to think no, and I'm not just like, oh my God, I'm so great at this. It doesn't affect my life. You know, like, that's not the point. But if you look at like my Instagram feed, if you look at it right now compared to what it's like when I'm on a hike, I don't post shit over the winter, you know, like, I really don't. Sometimes I like even wait a bit on the podcast episodes, because I'm like, I don't want my feed to just be backpacker radio, because then I'm just backpacker radio and then it's just the same feed twice. But in the winter, it's like, I'm not I'm not going outside to take a photo. You know, like I'm not going to take a photo so that I can put it on my Instagram so that I can keep my content, because more content means more followers. My following hasn't grown since the AT, and I'm fine with that because honestly, I haven't done, actually asterisk the JMT, I haven't done that much since then. You know, like I haven't done enough to warrant it growing. I haven't done enough for people to follow along, and I'm not going to fake something just so they can do it. That being said, that's my personality. When I'm on trail, I post loads, and that's what I've limited down. You know, like I love taking pictures. I love taking videos. One of my first Christmas presents was a video camera. I've edited videos on every platform there is. I do wedding videography. I worked as a videographer for a summer camp for 2 years, as a photographer for 1. I like doing this stuff. So no, it doesn't take away from it because it's a hobby that I pursue and enjoy and that I like to do because I don't like to journal. And it gives me more to look back and watch a video. It makes my parents less worried to see a video of me doing stuff. And for me, it's like, that's part of my hike. That makes my hike. That's something I enjoy. If it's a chore that you're just doing because it's like, guys, I can't go do this nice thing with you because I've got to stay here and do my work, maybe that is taking away from your hike, and maybe that's something you should take a look at. But that's person by person, and it all depends on how much you're putting into it and how much of that you'd be doing on your own if the following wasn't there.
Yeah. Lisa, anything to add to that?
Oh, I think this goes back to the conversation of like, when do you become an influencer? Because I definitely don't consider myself one, but and like when I was on the PCT, I think it was just people I knew who mostly followed me as far as I knew. But I think I would agree with Chance in the sense that for me, it's a hobby outside of the Instagram medium. Like I enjoy writing, I enjoy storytelling, I enjoy getting better at like creative pursuits. So I think for me, it doesn't take away. However, I will say, you know, if I do start to feel like it is, then I try to stop. I guess like there was a time in my life where I felt like obligated to take pretty this was like way before I ever even found through hiking, but I was really into photography for a while, which like I want to get better at it now, but I did start to feel like it was an obligation almost, and so then I honestly just kind of stopped for a while.
Yeah.
I will say, like, a lot of people, like, you see people all the time that are like, I need to take a social media break, you know, like it's affecting me too much, it's bumming me out, whatever it might be, they'll get off for a while. I've never found myself having to do that because I don't put myself in I limit, this is so hard to say, I limit what I see on social media so that I don't fall into that spiral. Like if you look at how many people I follow, it's some meme accounts I like, it's some people on like reality TV shows that I find entertaining, and it's people I know personally. And that's not by happenstance. Like that's just, I want to see people whose lives I interact with, and I've learned that, and I've auto-corrected and adjusted along the way. And I'll give an example, which is that I started the PCT with Dixie. I started the PCT with Homemade Wanderlust. We started on the same day. We were out scouting photos together. We exchanged numbers. Like we hiked in the same vicinity the first few nights, camped together, you know, in similar spots in the first few days, and parted ways. And she was nice. And I followed her on Instagram because we exchanged our info. And I don't follow her anymore. And it has nothing to do with her as a person. But I see the stuff that she posts, or I used to see the stuff that she posts, and it would, I noticed, make these thoughts go off in my head of, should I post more of that? Should I do more videos? Am I not doing enough? Should I, you know, it started getting me thinking that way, and it was like, I don't want to think that way. This isn't a job. This is my hobby. And so I unfollowed her, and like, whenever I see her, I say hi. Like, we're very cordial. We're very friendly. We're not in any ways not cool, you know, but it was like, I see the thoughts that are starting to go through my head when I see what you're posting, because I'm comparing myself and I'm choosing to not follow people that I don't have like a personal friendship with in terms of like my day-to-day life, because I don't want to create that competitive environment in my head where I'm basing my worth off of someone else. But I don't think everyone does that, and that's why it's case by case.
This one is like my personal grant thesis. I'm going to dive way down into this on my next point, so I'm not going to go further on that point, even though I do have a lot to say about it. I will say, like, if I'm just speaking honestly, again, I got a good amount of attention on the PCT just because of who I was hiking with, that there were times where like I was bored, I was seeking something, I would just post an Instagram story just because I wanted that attention feedback loop. Like if I think that I would have hiked the trail 10 years prior, I wouldn't have had that option. I would have had more boredom, or I would have had to fill that with imagination or something else. I wouldn't have been able to have the instant feedback that Instagram would have given me to do that. And like, I've tried to be more conscious about that. Like I try to use social media more consciously or just remove it from my life. But if I'm speaking honestly, there was a point where like I was using Instagram to just give myself that positive attention that I was seeking. And it certainly was not healthy. I don't think it's healthy for anybody.
I think that's something that people don't realize is like, I heard this from my friend's little sister once, and I didn't even know it was a thing, but like, people will compare like how many people you're following versus how many are following you in like an egotistical way of like, you know, like, oh, I have X amount more followers than I'm following. And for me, it's like, I don't follow that many people because when I look at Instagram, like I notice things like, you know, what I just explained. And so I consciously don't follow people that I haven't met on trail or spent a quality amount of time with, to the point that I still stay in touch actively. And periodically I'll go through my Instagram and I'll unfriend people that like were in my sorority or in high school that I no longer interact with. And it's because I want to see on Instagram, the shows I'm following and like memes that are funny, but when it comes to people and people's lives that I'm going to, you know, subconsciously judge my own life against, I want it to be people that are directly in my life or people that I directly interact with or stay in touch with, and not really anyone else. I don't need to like, I don't want to compare myself to people that I think have like a much better life than me. And so when you look at like me being like, when did this happen, you know? It's like, for me, I'm still looking at that same feed that I looked at in college. I'm still looking at that same narrowed down personal connection feed. It's not the same way back to me as I am to other people looking at my account. You know, like I look at Instagram and I see my friends and my family and people I know, and people look at my Instagram and they see someone that has a lot of followers and it's just this figurehead. And it's like, I view the app for myself way differently than you view the app for me.
Mm-hmm. So sort of a different approach to, I think, maybe the same question. And we can edit this out if this is not something that you want on air. But have you ever touched up a photo to like alter your appearance?
Fuck yeah. I don't want you to see my wrinkles. You know how many times I've cried on trail? I called, oh my God, there was a family of like 8 that saw this. I was on the AT. I called my best friend at home on FaceTime, sobbing because I was like, look at my crow's feet. They are so defined. And she was like, you've been hiking in the dirt. You haven't showered for 9 days. There's dirt caked in it. Like, what are you talking about? But then I'll take a selfie on trail on occasion, and the crow's feet look like they've been fucking stomped on by a really angry bird. And it's like, holy shit, that's not what my face looks like. And yeah, I'll fucking smooth them out, because it's like, I look at that and I cry that I'm going to die tomorrow because I look so old. And it's like, no, you just got dirt shoved in your face and it's making you really sad. And it's taking a photo of you in a moment you really like, at a place you really like, and all you can look at is your stupid fucking crow's feet.
So question, if you were texting, like,
yes.
If you were texting a group of friends, would you go through the effort of editing that same photo?
It depends on the friends.
So
because if
I guess,
I have a photo that I edited to the way that I like, and I'm sending it to a friend, I'm going to fucking go with the one that looks better, and where I like smooth out my crow's feet. If you're sending a
selfie to a group of friends, are you going to go through the process of smoothing out wrinkles?
It would not be a selfie that I would post online.
That's the point, is like the difference between public consumption and your friends. So like the way that you're engaging with it on a public medium is different than the way that you would engage. Because you're making the argument that like, I only put people that I care about that are in my life. That's the intake component of it. The output component of it sounds different to me.
Yeah, and that's like all to do with self-consciousness. And it's like,
so this is an interesting conversation about social media in general, because I think that social media is a feedback loop that creates more of the self-consciousness.
We'll go one at a time before I get too many thoughts to remember them. But in terms of sending my friends messages, like, I'll send my friends messages of my camera below my face where I try to see how many chins I can get. Yeah. That's not something that I would ever post on social media. However, on the flip side, like, not even just Instagram, I saw the show art we put out for our last freaking panel, and I almost texted Elise saying, hey, can we redo the show art because I look fat as fuck in that photo. And I held myself back from it because I was like, you can't create extra work for someone because you're self-conscious about how you look. But it's not just Instagram. It's not just, oh, I'm posting this for my followers. It's anything that's on the internet for everyone to see, as opposed to someone that I trust and have a close connection with, and I'm sending a message directly to them. That's something where it's like, I'm always going to be self-conscious about that. you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that just speaks to the larger conversation of social media is like, I think it not only exposes your, the areas where you are self-conscious, but it can create more self-consciousness. And that is the question is,
you let it, because here's
it sounds like you're letting it is the thing.
No, you'd think that. But if I posted, here's why. If I posted, like, and I'm not drastically altering my photos, you know, I'm not like using the pretty filters and like, you know, squeezing things in and making things bigger and, you know, like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm smoothing out some wrinkles that are coming with age. And when I scroll back through my feed and I'm like, oh, I want to look at that nice photo I took, or, oh, let me show you, like, this person I just met who's talking about this thing where I was also there. Like, let me show you this. Any of those times, if I didn't take the 2 seconds to smooth out a wrinkle that you would never notice on that photo, I would be thinking of nothing but that wrinkle. I wouldn't think about the memory. I wouldn't be thinking about this and that. And that's my own self-consciousness. That's not for people. That's not.
Do you do that in your own camera roll for things that are not public consumption?
Oh, yeah.
You do? Things that you don't share, you edit the photo of yourself?
There are so many photos that I've never shared to Instagram that if I was trying really hard, I could have a post out like every other day. Like,
but I'm saying, do you edit those photos on your own camera roll?
Yeah, and I choose to post maybe one of them, maybe two of them, but I'm not going to post 70 photos of me on one hike and like make a unique caption for each of them just to have content. But if I have these photos that I like and there's something that I have in these albums that I like to edit because, again, I like editing photos. I like color correcting and changing the stuff on it. Like, I'll smooth out a wrinkle if I know that I'm the only one that'll notice that difference and it'll only impact me and how I feel about myself when I look at that photo. No one else is going to notice it because I'm not doing anything drastically different. But, like, fuck, my mom sent me a photo of her for her new job at a school and asked me to smooth out some wrinkles. And it's like, does that mean she has a problem with it? No, it's just people get self-conscious about things, and I know it's small enough that no one else would notice. So if it makes me feel better, if anything, that cures that for me.
I just, and I'm not trying to point fingers at you. Again, I'm trying to point fingers at the culture at large, but like, true or false is the saying, like, look good for the gram. Like, I think people make dietary decisions about, or clothing decisions, or whatever it might be. They think about their appearance. 100%. And I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm talking about the culture of Instagram.
If I wanted to look good for the gram, I would be posting a lot more photos than I post. Because there are photos where I look hot as fuck. And I'm wearing skimpy ass shit.
I think we're diverting the...
No, but I used to post that stuff on Instagram. I don't anymore because it's like, that's not really what I like to post that much. I still edit them. I still like those photos. I still send them to friends.
My question is, does Instagram create a culture of making... I think maybe specifically women, but everybody more self-conscious about their appearance because they know they're going to be perceived by this larger public audience. And I think this is even true in a world like backpacking where it's hiker trash and you pride yourself on being dirty. Like I'm not trying to point a finger at you. I think this is a cultural thing. To me, it seems obvious that the answer is yes. I think you're being a little bit defensive right now.
I'm being defensive because we're saying it's Instagram. It's not Instagram, it's social media. It's literally media in general. It's how we portray everything in media. It's not just Instagram. And to say it's Instagram, then it's like, well, you guys have a problem, but us over here on this other place are great.
Social media. We'll talk about social media.
Yeah, I would agree too with the point of media in general. Of course, that's like the age-old debate.
It was,
everything. And again, I think it goes back to the critical thinking of like consciously consuming. But I do think there is, if you're not super familiar with that world, you might not know those type of things that go into that, and that can affect your image of yourself if you're constantly consuming things and thinking that that's just how those people look. I will say, like, to offer a different perspective, every time I notice myself doing that, I try and challenge it by saying, nope, that's what I look like, and I'm beautiful the way that I am. And like, not that I'm perfect at it, but like, instead of like, honestly, the show art was a great example because I have a good side and a bad side. I feel like everyone does. And it was my bad side. And I was like, oh, I don't like this photo of myself. But I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, that's what I look like. And I look great. And like, I try to just, you have to change like that inner narrative. For me, I guess what I'm trying to say is I try to change the narrative that I'm telling myself rather than like the actual photo itself.
Yeah. For me, it's like, I don't think that means that, like, for example, I have a problem with social media or social media is a problem for me. I think that I have a problem with my own self-esteem and it affects everything in my life. Like, I'm not going to go out with a huge pimple on my face and not put cover up on it It's the same thing. It's just not a photo. It's my face in real life.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. I feel like maybe you think I'm pointing a finger at you.
Triggered.
Okay.
It's not at me. It's just like, but I never talk to anyone about this stuff. No one ever wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've got all these thoughts.
I know. I can tell.
And I think that, to your point, like, everything that we consume does affect that.
For sure. And so I'm obviously not going to name names, but I know someone in the backpacking world who confessed to me that they did do the thing that you were talking about. They would edit their body shape to make themselves. You
told me that once. You would never tell me who it was. If you're that person, Zach is a very trustworthy friend because I tried.
I would never throw anyone in the dirt, even off of the public sphere. But I totally understand it. It makes perfect sense to me. I think the problem that it perpetuates is somebody goes to Instagram and sees that person and like, damn, they look so good at this age. Like, it makes them feel worse about themselves, and they have to start editing. And all of a sudden, like, you have this totally plastic, fabricated world on Instagram.
Where eating disorders come from.
Totally.
And, sorry, like, content warning, but yeah, like, that shit's dangerous. It does cause like real life problems and health issues and things that affect people's lives. And like, you know, it starts with like, it's a slippery slope, I think.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in like briefness. I'll like touch on it quickly, but it's like, maybe it's because I had one, you know, like maybe it's because I went through high school with an eating disorder that I learned how to take in from media what I want to take in and how to not be affected by the parts that used to truly affect me. Because I think when people do base themselves off of social media, even when they need breaks from social media, it's like something about how you're consuming the social media is not healthy for you. If you're looking at this and saying, this person looks so pretty at this age, why don't I look like that? Then, you know, like, it's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't a healthy environment for you to be on right now if that's what it's triggering you to do, you know? Whereas for me, it's like, I've been triggered up the freaking wazoo. I'm done being triggered. I've gotten through it, taken as much medicine and therapy as I've needed. I feel good about the fact that I can look at this other stuff and accept the fact that I don't look like that and still be self-conscious as fuck about myself. But I feel like I view social media in a very healthy way because I don't take any of it in terms of like other people or any of that stuff to heart, because I limit myself from doing that. Doesn't mean I'm not self-conscious, doesn't mean that I'm not going to smooth out a wrinkle because it makes myself feel better, but if smoothing out that wrinkle makes me not go want to like throw up a meal or something, I'm going to fucking smooth the wrinkle.
Yeah, and again, I wasn't trying to make this a Chance thing.
No, I'm yelling at the world.
I'm talking about the culture overall, and I'm just trying to like have an honest conversation about, I think, some of the negative things. And you guys are right, this is a media thing at large, but like when I look at a GQ magazine, like I understand that what I'm looking at is not the person that I'm looking at. For a long time, I thought when I was looking at somebody's Instagram photo, I was looking at that person, and I've kind of had my mind blown that that's really not the case. Like even like the normal Instagram user is using the same tricks that, you know, the supermodels are getting with Photoshop. So
that's because you met Jenna, and she's actually looks like Jennifer Aniston.
My wife is beautiful.
She looks the same on social media as she does on real life, which is just fucking gorgeous.
But I mean, my wife, who is beautiful, she's obviously insecure too. Like everybody's insecure.
Right.
And I think that the more you dive into social media, for most people, I think it'll exacerbate that. And that's the only thing that I'm trying to get to, I think.
Yeah. And I'm like the reason I'm letting myself get heated about this stuff is A, I never get to rant about this stuff and it feels good. And B, like, I don't want it to just be like a normal conversation where we're giving the same type of tonality as if we're like requesting like or recommending like a backpack. Like, I think this is something that people feel really passionately about. And obviously with all the like pros and cons in terms of how people are like keyboard warriors and like, you know, like attackers and like, you know, whatever you might be, like people get very passionate about these topics. And so I'm just like, yeah, I'll give you all of what I'm thinking and not tone it down.
The last thing I want to talk about with this, and I don't even know if this is a conversation worth happening, because you're not changing the tide with this regardless of what we say, but I think it's worth at least just posing the question of like, is the Instagram influencer world having a negative impact through hiking? Like, I know some people certainly think so. And maybe we're biased because like we all financially gain from backpacking in some capacity, right? Like even Elise, who's paid for by the show, we have sponsors. Like I'm not ignorant to the fact that like there's finance wrapped into what we do. So maybe there's definitely bias that needs to be addressed, but maybe to play devil's advocate to yourself, if you're going to argue against your own thesis, do you think that there's any negative drawbacks to the Instagram influencer culture in thru hiking specifically?
Yeah, I can go both rounds. I think that the negative drawbacks, yeah, there are, like you're taking places that, how am I going to say this? I'll go with the positives first because those are easier. I think one of the reasons that people might think that it's having a negative influence goes back to this is my thing. You don't look like the type of person that would do this, so I don't want you out here just because you saw it online. Like the girls that are in like yoga pants and like a bra on a mountaintop, like, giving a peace sign, and then they go up to McAfee's Knob and they leave like I've heard people bitch about all the water bottles that people will leave up there. That's a problem because of rewind 30 minutes and listen to that rant. But I think a lot of it like stems from, people being like, they aren't who's supposed to be out here. And it's like, who are we to say who's supposed to be out here, even if a trail does run through this? So that's a positive, is like, I think it's another type of thing where we think it's a negative because the influencer doesn't fit our idea of who should be on the trail.
We're already veering. Like,
how are we veering?
The question was, to play devil's advocate, do we think that there are any negative consequences to, I think this is a new point that you're bringing up, but just for where we are in the conversation, I'd like to focus on do you think Instagram influencer culture is having a negative impact on thru hiking?
It's hard for me to say yes when we're less than a month away from going to Wisconsin to promote the Ice Age Trail for the Wisconsin.
You can be self-critical. I try to do it all the time. Like, I hate myself in a lot of regards because I struggle with these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's like such a, I said in the beginning, I'm going to flip back and forth, because it's like, I mean, we're about to go to Wisconsin to promote the Ice Age Trail for the Wisconsin Board of Tourism. They want more people to go through these trail towns and support them. They want more people to go out and see these parts of their state that they love. The Board of Tourism is telling us, hey, if you could put a lot of attention on these spots, like, we'd really like to get more people out here experiencing this trail and this initiative, and like, it's helping them get people to know a trail that isn't as widely known as the AT. And it's like,
we're back to saying the positives,
because that's all I can think about, because we're about to go do it. It's like, I'm trying to think of a negative, but we're planning this whole trip around it that I feel like I'm like, like, someone else give me a negative so I could have like a thought prompt.
So I think, of course, there are negatives, because there's negatives to everything. I'm
not saying there's not. I just can't think of any.
No, I think it's almost like too broad of a question, I feel like, because putting all Instagram, quote unquote, influencing in one bucket, I think is maybe potentially oversimplifying it. And so the negatives of things that I have personally seen on Instagram is people doing things that are directly harmful to the environment in front of a large public audience. Things like having fires in areas that you're not supposed to and like posting about it. Things like camping where you're not supposed to and posting about it. And because, and you might not even know any better, but then you're showing this huge audience that this is something you could go do. And if they aren't doing that research like we talked about in the beginning, then they all go do it too. And so I think that those would be the negatives, is the fact that, if you have influence in any capacity in any facet of life and you're setting a bad example, then that's going to have negative impacts. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be said for, politics, mm-hmm. teachers, anything.
Yeah. I think one of the criticisms, and we're getting out of the Zach's personal hate for Instagram world, I think this applies more to YouTube. Not a personal attack whatsoever.
You don't need to say that before.
I know, but I can feel you winding up a little bit sometimes.
I just love arguing today.
I can tell. I've heard this critique from people who are involved with the trail community that obviously the average person who goes out on the trail today is much different than they were 15 years ago. Like, that's a given any 15-year stretch, right? But I think especially with the advent of the internet and especially these social apps, it's like people going out on these trails with their GoPro doing this and just like thinking that they're a celebrity the entire time.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate to that.
Get heated. You want me to rub your shoulders?
Yeah, do it. Come hype me up in my corner. So we say that because that's the example that's currently happening. However, there are people, and I hate to say this example because there's a particularly sordid history. John Muir out there plastering his name on everything, acting like he discovered, or, godforsaken Christopher Columbus. Like, it's not a new phenomenon for people to go to a place and like claim it in some way, or like, I guess it's like a very colonial thing, but like to want some sort of fame or notoriety from visiting a place that they feel is special. So I think we are oversimplifying it when we're saying, oh, it's social media, and like now you see all these people with cameras and shit. Go back 15 years ago, half those tree carvings, they came from people who wanted to say, hey, I was here. Like,
do you think social media has slowed down people carving in trees? I don't actually know.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I just think that it's come in different formats, and now that that's what the technology is, and that's where our society is, and that's what something we're doing as a whole and everywhere, it is also coming into the outdoors.
I will say, and as an honest critique of myself, because I am the man behind the Trek, I think help exacerbate this. This is part of the internet, is social media has definitely created a larger generation of narcissists. Like, everybody posts everything like they're the most self-important exhibitionists of all time. Not everybody. There's a lot more people doing that today. Like, I remember when Twitter first came out, it's like drinking a cup of coffee. All of a sudden people thought they were important for carrying out regular everyday activities. And I think that's just kind of evolved. But now everybody is chasing the carrot of attention, and I think that there is a generational shift where everybody wants to be like the Jake Paul type or whatever it might be, and I think it can. Pollutant is the wrong word, and I think you're right that this has existed forever. But to combat what you said, I don't think Christopher Columbus's name is held in positive regard today. Like, I think
we've had this exact conversation before, and it went out on Patreon episode. Or maybe I'm having deja vu, but
I don't remember.
Yeah, you're right, but neither is Jake Paul's, and people are starting to figure out the truth about John Muir. I feel like if that's not widely known, he has like a very racist and misogynistic history. And yeah, I mean, I think there's also people who had positive impacts that made themselves very well known. Like, I'm blanking. But like, okay, like for example, Grandma Gatewood, now somebody's going to email me about like she had some bad history or something, but like she was one of the first women to hike the AT and probably inspired a lot of people. And like, not saying that I don't know if she, shared publicly about her. Yeah, shared publicly about her journeys, but like she had to have, like, I've heard about her, and if she didn't want people to know, probably I would have never heard about her,
I mean, this has been something that's gone on for ages. As someone who's doing like a shit ton of research on the AT right now, there was a huge freaking elitist mentality behind who could and who couldn't go on the trail, and like just them trying to keep it from other people seeing it. Same type of gate setting stuff.
Yeah, more accessible, I guess, now. Like, in these conversations maybe are just happening more for the masses. And also, this is a kind of a side rant, but it, I think, pertains in the sense that something that I always find interesting is, I read once that we are not evolutionarily programmed to take in all of the things that we take in daily because of the news, social media, just all the information that we have access to. Literally, we evolved to interact with a group of, say, 40 people. We were nomadic, and we were looking out for those 40 people because it was inherent to our survival. That's how we evolved and how we learned to function essentially as a species. And then now we're being bombarded with all of this information about our species every day that, is positive or negative or whatever. And we're literally not meant to handle that.
Yeah, human beings are empathetic creatures, and you can't bear the burden of everybody in the world because there's so many issues without becoming overwhelmingly depressed because
exactly
the 40 people, the worst thing that's going to happen is like you have scurvy, you have cancer, and like that's very sad. But that's worse than like there's a famine for these millions of people and what's happening in Afghanistan, and we're arguing about that. Like, we're not meant to carry that because we're creatures of empathy. I don't know how we got here based on
I'll just bring us back. I think, like, for me, a pro that people don't talk about, and, like, I'll give a pro to the Instagrammers on here and the influencers on here because for some reason that's all I can think of. But with me, it keeps me really accountable. You know, we talk about like influencers going out and like there's more trash, there's more this, there's more that. Not for me, bud, because I go out there and I'm freaking terrified to do anything wrong because God forbid someone saw that I did something that wasn't fully Leave No Trace on the internet and then I had to deal with that wrath. It makes me so anxious, and it applies to people I camp with too. I've had people I've camped with in Colorado car camping for the weekends who have wanted to make a fire when we shouldn't make a fire, and logic alone and saying we shouldn't do this didn't hold tight. It came to me being like, okay, then I can't be here because I can't be in photos where you're having a fire because that can't show up on my stuff because that is not something that I want people seeing. And that's something where if I didn't have this, I would stay pretty quiet, and I probably would get timid and be afraid to say anything because I wouldn't want to like, you know, like argue with my friend or like put my foot down on something that they don't see the weight in. But with this, it's like, hey, if you won't listen to Logic alone, if you won't listen to Leave No Trace, if you won't listen to this and that, and you still want to have your fire, I'm going to have to go camp somewhere else because I have this thing where, you know, I have to be held to a certain standard and I have to live up to that. And for me, yes, it's different for people watching it who aren't me and how they interpret it. But for me personally, it keeps me really freaking accountable. It makes me way better at being outdoors in a way that honors Leave No Trace than not that I'd be like an asshole outside or anything like that, but I'm just saying like I'm so much more cognizant of it because of this than I would be without it.
And I would say, to piggyback off of that, as someone on like the being influenced end of things, this is one of my points, so maybe we can just like wrap it in here, is like the power of social media to influence change in positive ways. Like I feel like even just picking up trash, like when I see someone has done it and they post about it, like maybe I guess you could argue that's self-serving, but like the more I see it, the more I've noticed I will pick up more trash because I see other people doing it.
Even if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, who gives a fuck?
Yeah,
like the end result is a positive
and
thing.
I don't necessarily post about it, but then that got me thinking maybe I should, because like when I see other people do it, I'm literally like, oh, if they can do it, like I know that I should. And like it makes me more conscious and less able to be like, I don't see that micro trash on the ground.
I mean, we're literally giving shit away for someone who goes and gets Zach socks. You know, and we're using social media to go get Zach socks.
Yeah, and like I pick up trash all the time because I like this is not the first time I forgot something. Like I have ADD. Like I'm prone to just leaving stuff on the trail around my house. Like I talked about how I leave cabinet doors open. Like my brain just doesn't work right. So I try to be cognizant of it and make my net impact on the trail very positive. Like I pick up everything that I can see, like shy like a bloody Band-Aid or something like that. But like I'm always picking up trash, whether it's a day hike or backpacking. Like I don't leave something on the trail for that exact reason.
Cool. I think that in through hiking, we see people treat the outdoors a lot better than we ever do in any other type of like people living in the city and going car camping for a weekend or, you know, whatever it might be. The people that through hike or section hike or long distance hike in any capacity have so much more of an in-depth knowledge on Leave No Trace than anyone, I feel like, who's not a through hiker. Like we have some sort of thing with it that we love. Elise has something. I'll let her get in quick before I finish the thought.
And I was going to say, and to that point, I think that's a positive aspect of influencing.
Yeah.
If you can impact someone to the point where they want to go through hike or backpack, and then they develop that intimate relationship with the outdoors where they want to protect it, like the more stewards we can get, the better.
For sure.
And I think that's a very positive part of social media influencing.
But I think the part that makes this such a heated debate is that not everyone has that through hiker mindset. I didn't know what LNT really was until I started researching the PCT. And when a lot of people see things on social media and then go to those places and don't do things right and leave litter or, don't follow Leave No Trace, those are people that are gonna do that shit in the real world when they go do their little trips anyway, and now they're doing it in your space because they're seeing it, but that's still that person either not knowing or not giving a fuck. And I think the fact that we have social media doesn't make it worse. It doesn't make someone throw that extra piece of trash. It just brings more light to the fact that that happens everywhere, every day, and it's naturally a problem.
I don't think thru hikers are better about trash because of social media. And I can say that confidently because I thru hiked before social media was a thing. I think being in nature for a long time makes you more in tune with not wanting to see trash on the trail.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's why. I'm just saying, like, we've got harsher critics. When we're talking about Instagram and backpacking, it's different than talking about Instagram and, you know, day hiking or something that people that, you know, like anyone can drive from the city and go on a 2-hour hike and go back to the city. I'm saying that we have such a more critical audience because thru hikers care so much about the places they're going through because they spend so much more time in those places. So it's under a much bigger spotlight than it is in any other type, I feel like, of activity.
I think that's an interesting take because I think that also, I think I spoke to you guys about this earlier. There does seem to be a hyper criticism also of even just influencing in general in the backpacking / thru hiking community specifically. And maybe it is because people hold it so precious. It means so much to so many people, understandably so, that they just want to protect it. And, you know, everyone obviously has different opinions on what that protection looks like. And so, but it's something everyone is super passionate about, and like that's our common ground. And then maybe it's a matter of like, how do we take that common ground and find a way for it to like be positive for everyone?
I love that.
Yeah, leaving it on a feel good note.
Yeah, I like that.
Even as the old grumpy guy, I agree with your point that I think that if you obtain this reach and you have pure intentions with it, like you can really spread a positive message. Who was the Claire Gallagher? She's like, I think one of the best at this. Like she really utilizes her platform to get the message about conservation out there and like is very engaged politically. Like I think she's somebody that everybody should be following and I think is a great role model for what you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm. Also, Katie Bowie, I believe she does a lot of stuff, and there's a skier who I'm blanking on right now, but she does like, and they like straight up go to Congress. Like that's some real shit. Influencing.
Goes to Congress. They do that, hike the hill.
Okay, my last point, and this is just me venting. This is like how I arrived to my decreased usage with social media. And I don't think I'm going to say anything that's earth-shattering for anybody, but I think it's important for people to define healthy usage with social media. And this is me just turning the mirror to myself. Like I got to the point where I realized my engagement with social media was not healthy. And I will kind of talk through about how I arrived at that. So I think this is especially true during a thru hike because you're getting so much positive attention. As I alluded to, I was hiking with Viking, and like I think this is true for anybody who's doing a thru hike. You're doing something incredible. Your friends and family are going to rally around you, and like for a certain percentage of people, you're going to get more of a public attention, whether it's the Chaunce's level or even to a much smaller scale. Like I think that's prone to happen. I don't think that getting positive attention is inherently a bad thing. Elise has talked about this in the past, but like we are a species that has evolved on cooperation, and being part of a community is important to our health. People who are isolated are people who are going to struggle with their health. Like they can have the perfect diet, they can be sleeping great, but like if they're not connected with other people, they're just going to unravel. But I think that there's an undeniable risk that it can set the stage for addictive behavior. I've seen this with other people and certainly myself. So if every time you're opening Instagram, you're getting flooded with praise in the form of comments and direct messages, new followers, and or even something as simple as a like I get the dopamine hit when I see the heart pop up, you are getting that small hit of dopamine, which is the same chemical reward that's released after sex, cocaine, nicotine, etc. Obviously to a much smaller extent. I don't know if you've ever had sex before, but I would say that's a more pleasurable experience than a like on Instagram, but it is the same chemical. If you have the self-control to engage with this in a controlled, conscious manner, like you've got a few free minutes while you're taking a dump or you're waiting in line at the grocery store and you're like, hey, maybe I'll dip into Instagram to see what's happening, then I don't think there's anything inherently problematic with engaging with this platform. For me, it got to the point where I was 3 scrolls deep on Instagram before I even realized that I was looking at my phone. Like I wasn't thinking. I was in the middle of doing a work something. Somebody was talking to me and I was going through my phone. I realized that the behavior had become subconscious and like borderline compulsive. So I reflected. I realized I was having a kid. I didn't want my kid to be looking at me needing that human-to-human interaction that humans crave, and me be looking mindlessly at Instagram. So I made the conscious decision that I'm just going to stop posting to Instagram. For me, if I don't put something into it, I don't feel like I get much out of it. Like I'm not saying I'm never on Instagram, but my usage with it has been cut down dramatically. So to reiterate, I don't think social media, even though I've been like the old cranky guy, I think pretty consistently through this conversation, I don't think social media is inherently good or bad. Social media is a tool, and it's a matter of how somebody uses it. That said, the powers that be at these companies spend billions of dollars and a ton of time trying to figure out how to make these platforms as addictive as possible. It's literally they're creating a drug that sits in your pocket. So if you're able to work with it in a healthy manner, good for you, but the tides are working against you. So for that reason, I think it's healthy for anyone to define what healthy social media looks like for them, and to potentially set up some boundaries to ensure that you're staying within that fence. Like I said, for me, that equated to stop posting to Instagram. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Like, I still mindlessly scroll Twitter. I set up a daily limit for myself. I think it's at like 80 minutes at this point across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And like, once I hit that limit, I try to just be like, okay, I'm done. Like I can check my email, I can go listen to a podcast, I can do something else, but like, I'm done with this. And I was on the couch or in bed all last week, and like, I blew through that by noon every single day and just like hit the ignore button. So like, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. I'm very fucked up, but like, I'm making efforts to try to realize the way that Instagram is interfacing with my life. But think about this, and I'm sure you guys have been exposed to people who are engaged in social media to this extent, if not more. Even 2 hours of social media per day, which again, for some people might seem like an extreme amount, but for other people, we're good. A little bit of spillage.
Too much calm on the table.
So 2 hours of social media per day. That, over the course of a year, that equates to 1 month. Now think about if you were to remove those 2 hours per day from your life, and you allocated that 1 month to something productive. Like, what could you accomplish in a month's time? Could you learn a new language? Could you pick up a skill that could allow you to get out of your 9 to 5? Could you expand your imagination by reading a great nonfiction book? Could you spend more time with friends and family? Like, the number of things that you could do with a month over a year's span is huge. And I think that it's easy to spend like 5 minutes here. And then for me personally, 5 minutes very quickly turns into like, I'm on the toilet so long that my legs are going numb. Like, I just get sucked into it and I can't stop. I guess I'm just making the plea to people, because I've seen it through myself, to think about the way that they're engaging with the platform on a more conscious level. If you're not like anything that I've described, ignore everything that I'm saying, say that I'm a phone addict, that's great. But like, I've witnessed it with a lot of people. And I think that there's a lot of benefit to be had through evaluating your usage with it and trying to see, like, when you're done using this platform, do you feel better about yourself? Do you feel neutral? Do you feel worse? There were a lot of times where like, I'd get off Instagram and it's just like, you just brought down my mood by 3%. Just because it's so addictive, they give you that dopamine hit. I get hooked into it. So I'm ranting at this point, but yeah, that's kind of my thesis on why I've made a conscious effort to engage less with social media. And I will say, I feel better. I genuinely feel better. I feel like it's made me more open to my wife. It's made me more open to my son. And I would be ignorant if I wasn't acknowledging the fact that it had a negative impact on what I do as a profession. Like, I know that it's good for me to post to Instagram to engage people who are interested in my life. And I'm losing money by not doing that. But like, I prioritize my mental health over the money.
I have a very pointed question to follow up with. I hear you on your like personal accounts. Mm-hmm. However, obviously the Trek has accounts.
I don't do it.
Yes, but you are posting for the monetary. Obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure. How
do you feel that interfaces with your personal, I guess, opinion on the matter.
To go back to my original point, I think social media is a tool. It's not up to me to say somebody shouldn't be using Instagram. Like I do think it's important that people should check themselves to see that they're interacting with it in a healthy manner. It sounds like Chance has her behavior in check and like she engages it with it in a healthy manner. So for me to not post something for someone like Chance doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I do also realize that like posting on Instagram is posting in a casino. Like people are engaged with this dopamine hit continually. I understand that. It's something I struggle with. But it's the world that we live in, and I'm making the conscious effort to remove myself from it. I'm not saying that anybody else should do anything that they don't want to do. I think if you want to drink alcohol, if you want to go to the casino, if you want to do the social media, if you want to do cocaine, I think drugs should be legal. Like I think people should have the freedom to do what they want to do. And it's just, for me, I've decided to withdraw from it.
Yeah, I was just curious because I think there is a unique perspective among the people at this table, because I mean, I work in social media for, like I said, my 9 to 5, and so it's an interesting dynamic of, okay, obviously there is a need to understand a certain extent of it, and I guess for me, I think sometimes about how much am I contributing to, but I think it goes back to like the personal responsibility thing.
Right.
Ultimately, it's up to each individual how they're going to interact with the app. The stuff's always going to be out there to interact with.
And I do think that I'm sure there's a lot of people that have healthy interactions with it, but like I know you're also very aware. I forget what the documentary was, but like
the social experiment or the social something.
Yeah,
social dilemma.
Right.
And that being said, that's a quick point I want to make. It's interesting to see a mass audience start to understand that, because, and maybe this is how I've managed. I won't say my interaction with social media is super healthy by any means, but I think it's healthier than it has been in the past, partially because I was privy to that information from working in it. Mm-hmm. Like I've been to talks by Facebook talking about those things and like the algorithms, and same with like Snapchat. There's all these things like that go into it, and people are like, oh my God, my phone's listening to me. And they think it's not really, but it's like, how is that real? Your phone is listening to you if you have your microphone enabled on any apps. Like people don't realize that really is what's happening. Anyway, it's kind of a side rant, but I think the more aware you are of like how this tool might be manipulating your behavior, the more able you are to make a conscious decision about how you're interacting with it. And I think I just had the privilege, I guess, of being privy to that information maybe before things like the social dilemma existed, mm-hmm. or like before studies came out, because I saw it happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. I think that documentary was a major seed for me. I didn't curtail my social behavior right after that, but I think that turned into the plant that's like, this is too much for me.
Yeah. I've got my in conclusion. I wrote it all out. But fun fact, I didn't watch that video. I don't want to, because I just don't want to make it a thing for myself. You know, like I don't want to make it a thing of like all this stuff is going on. It's this thing, because it's not one, and I enjoy like the level I have with it. So like I haven't even watched that, and like I don't watch The Circle. I don't watch any of the social media things.
What's The Circle?
The Circle
is like some social media TV show. I just don't want to put myself on that comparing level. So I just like choose to like keep myself out of it. But I've got my conclusion, which is mainly a response to Zach's statement right there, which is also an explanation for why I'm so riled, which is that, you know, when you talk about like, you know, we all need to find like a healthy dose and this and that for us, and this isn't saying that you're saying it, but the part that gets me so heated about this stuff is that people assume that because you have followers, you don't have a healthy dose. They assume that because people follow you, you have an addictive problem. You have a problem with it in general. You don't know how to regulate it. You don't have balance. You haven't figured it out. And it's like, well, that's weird, because I put a freaking awful lot of time into figuring out how to improve things with myself and how to recognize things and work on it. And for you to just say, because I have followers, I have a problem, or it is a problem, or, you know, like it's an addiction, or you base everything off of it. It's like, well, those are some nice assumptions that like don't actually hold true for me personally. And I've put a lot, you know, like, why would you assume that about me? You know, and it like kind of like diminishes all the work that I've put into the healthy relationship that I have with social media, which pisses me off. After the PCT and all the shit I got for skipping the Sierra, I continued to post videos of my hikes for the AT, for the CT. I have them to edit for the JMT. And this sounds like, you know, I don't give a fuck, but I don't read the comments. I get a lot of comments on every single video. The reason they don't have any replies is I don't read them. I stopped reading them after the PCT because the negative really freaking sucked. And so, yeah, for some people, the comments give them a rush of dopamine. For other people, you don't necessarily know that I'm reading them. And guess what? A lot of the times I'm not. I know on Instagram I could have way more followers if I replied to every single comment. I know that's how you boost your engagement rates. I know all these things because I do my research. But that's not going to make me go and do that because I don't want to. And I think that's healthy, is for me to know my own limits and to want to, have them in place and to never let it get to a problem. And while we were sitting here, and then you got into the daily limits, I looked up my daily limits, because I was like, I wonder what mine are. Today, it changed from 2:45 to 2:53 when I switched back to my notepad. I've been on my phone for 2 hours and 53 minutes. Instagram isn't even on the list. I haven't even opened the app today.
Who are you talking to right now?
On what?
I feel like you're being defensive because you start off with being in response to what Zach said.
I'm defensive to the word, to the world, because I think that we have this idea about everyone who influences, and I don't feel like I fit in that mold with how I interact with my phone, and it pisses me off that I'm lumped into it.
I'm interested in this because I'm curious. I haven't personally encountered that opinion, I guess. I didn't know that was an assumption that people made.
I mean, we're saying that, do you edit your photos because you care so much about what people think? Do you, post all the time because I
just want to be clear that the thing that I was stating was a reflection on my behavior.
Again, it's not, it's just, it's, you see a lot because you talk to other people or you're on trail and you get asked questions. When I'm hiking, people ask me questions. It's just the idea you have about how much I live in my phone is wild. And it's not you. It's just, 4 years on trails, meeting lots of people meeting me. And it's it's not what it is for everyone. I know people that live their life by it, and that's okay. I know people, here's the thing, is I know people that have come to me and said, people who take social media breaks, come to me and I've had a problem going on in my life, and they're like, well, maybe you should take a break from social media. And it's social media isn't the problem. It's not part of the problem. You're just assuming that my problem is social media because I have a problem and because I also post to social media. Those two, just because I post to social media doesn't mean every problem I have is a social media problem. And I get a lot of that where it's oh, well, why don't you just take a break from social media? And it's it wasn't even part of this. I'm upset about something different. My life is affected because of something different. It has nothing to do with social media. Mm-hmm. That's the part that annoys me, is that I get a lot of impressions that people think that it's a problem just because you're a quote-unquote influencer. And then I just I go in my thing and I look at my week. That was today, but I'm going to look at my week because now I want to know. My week. This week I've been on my phone for 3 hours and 37 minutes on average a day. I averaged 36 minutes on Instagram. And it's I see this stuff on my end, and then I feel I get judgment from other people, and I'm what are you judging me based off of?
Do you get these comments a lot? I guess I'm just curious as to what.
Well, it's not necessarily comments. It's not someone's in my DMs riling my feathers. It's just and it's not even people meaning malintent. It's friends that have suggested I take a social media break, and it's are you listening to me talk? What? It's not social media. I'm not even hardly on it. I read 8 books a week right now, so I don't even have time for it. So if I've got issues and you're just pinning it on social media, you don't even know me.
I think to that point too, and this is not related to social media, something that has helped me a lot with being a better friend, I think, is I tend to go solution oriented. Someone comes to me with a problem, I want to help them by suggesting a solution. Sometimes people just want to tell you that shit's going wrong. They don't want you to offer a solution.
You have the stereotypical male trait. That's guys, that's how they fuck up, is they want to solve the problem, and then women, that's the stereotype anyways.
I did not realize that was a male stereotype, but yeah I think maybe, sometimes maybe that's just people to offer a reason for why that might be happening. Maybe people are just saying, oh, social media has caused me problems. Maybe that would help someone else. It's the same, the classic, don't, if someone comes to you about their mental health, don't say go try yoga.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's not.
No, totally. Yeah. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. People who struggled with alcoholism, then they become sober. I think oftentimes they can become preachy with that. And I feel like I have a healthier relationship with alcohol than I do even with my phone. Like you guys, I've podcasted with you 100 times and I have a Coors Light during the podcast. Like I can stop drinking, no problem.
Prove it.
I went 2 weeks. I was diarrheaing the entire time. But yeah, for me, the phone was a way harder thing to stop. Like it's always accessible. It doesn't have the negative consequences. It's, it's just a thing that I had to do that. And I'm not trying to project that on anybody else. I think it's easy to get sucked into that because like the documentary, the social experiment.
I think it's experiment.
Yeah. It's like, it's very illuminating as to how prominent this is across the culture. I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone at this table, but it's clearly a much bigger thing than people realize. And I don't think they realize necessarily the negative ramifications of it. So it's worth asking yourself the question. I'm not saying spend less time with.
Yeah. What is healthy use for you? And can you define that? And
for me, sometimes, honestly, like this is another part where it's like it gets me heated because it's like I know what I need and I know how to give myself what I need. But sometimes influencing like is more of a positive for me than it is for a negative. Like it's been a fucking shitty quarantine. I've had a hard time with it. I went back on antidepressants. I went back on anti-anxiety. I got so used to not going outside of the house in quarantine that I don't like to leave the house right now. And for me, it's like if I say yes to this campaign, for example, like ACE, where I'm really excited to do it, and I'm taking this Weber grill out into the woods and I'm taking photo shoots with it, sometimes that's the only thing that can get me out of the house is the fact that I guaranteed someone I would go do this. I gave them my word that I would go do this. And sometimes it's like I need that commitment to be able to push myself to leave my couch and get out of this spiral and just go outside for the afternoon because I can't find the motivation to do it myself. And definitely that's like the small spectrum of things. It's not the overarching thing. Like it's definitely more of a problem than it's not. But I think when like you see how it's helping you in those ways, when like you can barely help yourself and other people are like, oh, take a break from it, it's definitely making it worse. It's like, like it's not always cut and dry, this is a bad thing. And I think that we're very used to saying it's a problem, it's addictive, it's a negative, and it's like we block out everything that could be not a problem if you treat it in a healthy way.
And I think to expand on both of your points, maybe that's why like defining healthy use is so important. For some people that might be cut it out altogether. For some people that might be a couple hours a week is totally fine. I think to Zach's point of like, if it's something that doesn't negatively affect you and you have like been real with yourself and it is not a negative or not, 100% negative or whatever, whatever that level is that you feel like is healthy in your life, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be black and white. Everything is nuanced.
I don't even think it has to be like a time thing. Like you look at somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk, like genuinely seems like a person that social media is his fuel and gives him purpose in life and just happiness to connect with different people. I'm not even saying social media is bad at a certain amount. I'm just saying like evaluate
what is it for you.
Because it is undeniably, it can be very addictive. They make it that way. Like they intentionally make it that way. So it's just good to take a step back to be like, is this a good thing for me or is it not? And if it's a good thing for you, don't change an ounce about the way that you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to evaluate not just like, is this a problem in general, but is it a problem for me? Because I think just because social media is not a problem for me doesn't mean that it's not a problem for someone else, and that you need to be able to think in that way too. Whereas just because social media is a problem for someone doesn't mean it's also a problem for someone else. Like I think that we think that whatever it is for us is for everyone, and that like, if I struggle with it, everyone does, or like we make these blanket statements, and it's like, it's more important than to figure out what it is for everyone is like, hey, like, is this something where I even need to put the thought into if I need to regulate it for myself? Someone who barely watches TV doesn't track their TV time. They don't need to, But if it's something where it's like, this is affecting me, take a step back and be like, what part of it is affecting me? Is it because my feed is full of people I don't know rather than people I know, and I'm getting this superficial view on life from people that I don't even know in real life? Is it because I'm glued to it and I can't take my eyes off of it and I can't put the phone down? Like what is it that's making it a problem for you, and how can you fix that for yourself is, I think, the first step in all of it.
Totes.
We've gone very long for that reason. I think I'm just going to skip the segments. We'll save that for the next episode. I think at this point, people are probably ready for the end of the show.
2.5 hours of opinions that no one asked me about.
Yeah, it's long. So if you're still listening to this, thank you for bearing with this conversation. We had just rough bullet points about the things we want to touch on, and I think it went in a lot of different directions. I think it was some good conversation overall.
I think me choosing to not add my own bullet points and just talk as much as I was going to without adding anything more to it probably was good.
Hey, it's a panel. It's
also,
a loose conversation.
I probably should have said this at the beginning, but if you didn't want my opinions on social media, then you just don't listen.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't want our thoughts on social media, why are you here? You came to the wrong place.
There was a title on the episode.
Yeah. Don't go to McDonald's and complain that there's cheeseburgers. Thank you to our Chuck Norris Award winners on Patreon. That is Andrew, Austin McDaniel, Jason Lawrence, Christopher Marshburn, Sawyer Products, Brad and Blair from 13 Adventures, Brent Stenberg, Patrick Ciencialo, Brandon Spilker, and Matt Suka. You can follow us on social at Backpacker Radio on both Instagram and TikTok. Is that what it is on TikTok? Just at back. Do they do ats on TikTok?
You're asking the wrong person.
Okay. I thought I was asking the person that managed our TikTok.
You're the youngest one.
Yes.
Okay. Twitter, The Record Pod. I'm all backwards now.
Pod. I should start putting this in the show notes for you.
Yeah. I used to have an order. Yeah. Facebook.com/Backpacker Radio. You can follow Elise
at elise.at.
You can follow Chance.
Or unfollow at Juliana_Chauncey. I don't know. Do whatever
do what's good for you.
You can get my book, Hiking from Home, A Long Distance Hiking Guide for Family and Friends on Amazon.
Reduce that screen time.
Yeah.
Put a book in front of your face. It's not on ebook.
And actually, let's put a call out for, I'm curious to get other people's input on this. So if you've got strong thoughts about this subject, if we rubbed you the wrong way, if you've got something that you really agree with, send us a note, podcast@thetrek.co.
We'll have mailbags for days.
Mailbags for days, or not. At this point, they're probably not listening anymore. But thank you so much for listening, or not, and happy hiking.
Bye.